Chapter 1649. Chu Yang rushed out like a whirlwind. The energy in his body had finally dissipated. He didn't even have the strength to look back. His whole body fell to the ground with a plop. He didn't move at all. It wasn't that Chu Yang didn't want to move, but he really didn't have any strength left. He really couldn't move at all. Tan Tan finally rushed over and stood in front of Chu Yang. But he was still spitting out blood from his mouth. If the heavenly demon still wanted to go forward, Tan Tan definitely wouldn't mind risking his life to drag the heavenly demon down with him. The heavenly demon's injury was very serious. It was a complete blow. Even if it was a peak-grade supreme martial artist, it would be impossible for him to survive such a serious injury. Half of his body was completely shattered, and the remaining half was almost turned into a sieve by Chu Yang's sword energy. One hand was completely gone, and the other hand was still suffering from the merciless burning of the nirvana flame. The heavenly demon's injuries could hardly be described as severe. With such injuries, even if there were 10,000 people, there would still be 1,000 deaths. But the heavenly demon was still the heavenly demon. He was that what if? Perhaps it was because he wasn't a human, but a demon. Baidu search to see the latest chapter. First, he defeated the 7 supreme martial artists. Then, he fought a decisive battle with the 3-star Holy King and gained the upper hand. Then, he exchanged blows with the Tribulation Sword Master. Although he suffered a great loss due to his ignorance, he still made the Tribulation Sword Master unable to move. He even almost destroyed the sword spirit with one move. Such a cultivation was definitely unparalleled in the heavenly layer. If it was someone else with such an injury, they would have died many times over. But the heavenly demon was still alive and kicking. Yes, but more than half of his alive and kicking was due to pain. It was really too painful, and it was a continuous pain. The nirvana flame burned fiercely in his hand. The heavenly demon's pain was simply piercing straight into his marrow. He roared. He used his demonic energy, exhausted his cultivation, and spared no expense. But he still couldn't extinguish the life flame of the Phoenix clan. The heavenly demon wanted to cry but had no tears. But a demon was still a demon. He barely endured the pain. He used his demonic energy to form a knife. With a swoosh, he actually cut off ZJ's right hand from his forearm. It fell to the ground neatly. He even jumped twice. A viper bites the hand, and a warrior cuts the wrist. It was the same principle, but the heavenly demon's fate was even more helpless and tragic than the warrior who lost his wrist, because he was already holding a knife in his hand when he was cutting off his wrist. The nirvana flame was still burning slowly. From the looks of it, he wouldn't stop until the arm was completely burned. The heavenly demon roared and screamed, its voice almost hoarse. Even though he had the body of a heavenly demon, such an injury was too serious. Now both of his arms were gone, one of his shoulders was gone, and half of his body was shattered. The remaining half of its body was also riddled with holes. The heavenly demon's current injuries were much more serious than when it was captured and had its cultivation destroyed. The worst thing was that the power that ZJ had forcefully mobilized had been completely exhausted and could not be used again. Currently, he was basically at the end of his rope. At this moment, the heavenly demon's only thought was to escape. Only by surviving would there be a future. He tried his best to activate the remaining bits of devil chi. It covered half of his body. He tried his best to recover ZJ's injuries, even though the effect was minimal. But it was better than nothing. He glared at Tan Tan hatefully. Under the intense pain, the heavenly demon howled like a wolf. "Little one, I will take over your devil body sooner or later." It hurt so much. Damn it, damn it. His voice was still echoing as he turned around and left. His speed was extremely fast. With 1 fluttering and 2 fluttering, he was already hundreds of feet away. He had to go back as soon as possible and find the Dharma Supreme to replenish his spirit. If he didn't replenish his nutrients, ZJ would really die here. He had really gone for wool and come home shorn today. At this moment, Tan Tan was also at the end of his rope. He no longer had the strength to pursue and attack. He could only watch as the heavily injured heavenly demon left. The strong enemy was finally gone. His legs went soft and he fell to the ground. Coincidentally, he sat on Chu Yang. Minister Chu, who was limp all over and couldn't exert any strength, instantly cried out in pain from being sat on. He was like a pig being slaughtered. He was actually sitting on his ribs. He hissed and sucked in cold air. "If you don't stand up, I will punish you on behalf of my teacher." Tan Tan moved his butt comfortably, causing Chu Yang to scream again. He then said lazily, "You have to wait until I go back. When your junior brother comes out, you can tell him. It's useless to tell me, I'm not your junior brother. I'm also provoking you so that you can stand up sooner. My subordinates still need your heavy pills to save them. Why aren't you standing up yet? Is it very comfortable for me to sit on you? If it's comfortable, then it's okay to stay a little longer." Chu Yang sucked in a breath of cold air. "If it was you, I wouldn't have come over. You deserve to be beaten to death." Tan Tan snorted. He raised his head and said, "That's because you're meddling in other people's business. Who cares?" The two people who were stubborn with their words and refused to let Chu Yang off began to laugh. Actually, both of them were well aware of the situation. Chu Yang definitely didn't make a move because of a misunderstanding. He saw it more clearly than anyone else. However, he still chose to make a move. Furthermore, he made a move that left no room for leeway. Tan Tan, or rather, 3-star Saint King, was the same. He definitely wouldn't allow anyone to hurt Chu Yang, even at the cost of his life and soul. However, both of them wouldn't say it out loud. It was fine as long as they knew it in their hearts. If they said it out loud, the taste of gratitude would be too obvious. It would be too boring. That would make both of them feel uncomfortable. After a short while, Chu Yang flipped Tan Tan off from Chu Yang's body. Chu Yang was only momentarily exhausted and didn't actually suffer any injuries. After a short while, he recovered. Although his cultivation hadn't fully recovered, it wasn't a problem for him to move freely. This time, he flipped over and kicked out. A certain Saint King was instantly kicked 7 or 8 times. Ignoring the certain Saint King's angry glare, he started to search Chu Yang's body. He first took out an incomplete version of the heavy pill and swallowed it. "I don't have any pills. Gu Igu's injuries are the most serious." Tan Tan shouted. "Shut up," Chu Yang said fiercely and angrily. "I have eyes. I can see. I don't need you to run your mouth. Believe it or not, I'll slap you. Do you think you're so great just because you're a Saint King?" Tan Tan grinned and glared fiercely at Chu Yang. He scolded, "When I can move again, I'll let you have a taste of my power." However, a hint of a smile secretly flashed across the depths of his eyes. Tan Tan, this senior brother of the Tribulation Swordmaster, seemed to be really not bad. This time, Chu Yang had really bled a lot. The lives of Gu Igu and the others were hanging by a thread. If they had used the heavy pills, they really wouldn't have been able to be saved. The other 4 were still fine. They could recover a little with the incomplete version of the heavy pills. At the very least, their lives wouldn't be in danger. However, Gu Igu and that elder who had fought the most fiercely had almost all their internal organs smashed. If they didn't use the complete version of the heavy pills, they would really die. Chu Yang sighed painfully as he took out several heavy pills. He also cursed Tan Tan under his breath. "Bastard! Why do you always have to be like this? When that little Tan Tan comes back, you'll have to manipulate him properly. It won't be over if you don't show him 100 different tricks." Tan Tan sat at the side. At the start, he was just smiling in relief. Then, he swayed violently and fell down with a thud. He lost all consciousness. The Saint King's soul still hadn't fully awakened. Forcefully awakening it had ultimately resulted in a backlash. This time, he had gone through such a fierce battle. Now that the backlash had come, the damage was even greater. Now that the enemy was gone, the problem was solved, and his subordinates were saved, his wish was fulfilled. His mind relaxed, and he immediately fell into a coma. Chu Yang snorted and went over to take a look. When he realized that he was in danger, he kicked him to one side. When he woke up this time, it should be Tan Tan again, right? "This bastard, I'm really scared to death this time. What the hell are you doing?" Although Gu Igu and the others were recuperating when they saw Chu Yang kick the Saint King, they still couldn't help but glare at him furiously. This bastard, even if he's the Saint King's senior brother, he's still a little too rude. How can he kick the Saint King? Chu Yang was depressed. I've just saved your lives. I'm your collective savior. How dare you glare at me, this bunch of ingrates? On the other side, the heavenly demon roared as he fled. The speed at which he fled was extremely fast. Along the way, no less than hundreds of people fell to the ground, and their souls were all devoured by him. But to the heavenly demon, this little bit of spiritual energy was like a drop in the bucket. It was like a drop in the ocean. It was of no use at all. The heavenly demon was both depressed and scared. ZJ's spirit was dissipating continuously, and his cultivation also seemed to be gradually collapsing. Moreover, he was still a distance away from the Dharma Supreme. Could ZJ hold on? If he were to replenish the spirit energy of an expert right now, the consequences would be unimaginable. At this thought, he couldn't help but feel helpless. In front of him, there was another handsome junior scholar and a young lady slowly approaching. The heavenly demon followed the principle of if it's possible to have sex, so he didn't even bother to check on the other party and immediately attacked without hesitation. He bit down at once. No matter how small this grasshopper was, it was still meat. He thought that it would be a piece of cake. Unexpectedly, the junior scholar raised his head abruptly, smiled strangely, and said, "Huh? It's actually the heavenly demon?" The heavenly demon was stunned. As the other party spoke, he waved his hand and a colorless and odorless mist suddenly spread out. Then, with a swoosh, the sword was swift and ruthless. Invisible poison? The heavenly demon shouted. This time he was really going to cry. How could a random person he met use such a move like invisible poison? If it was in the past, the heavenly demon wouldn't care about this at all. It wouldn't even touch him. But now, there was nothing he could do. He was actually attacked head-on. Especially when he was biting someone with his mouth open and this invisible poison was sucked into his mouth. This could be said to be extremely tragic. Chapter 1650. At this moment, the heavenly demon's heart was filled with all sorts of emotions. Sour, sweet, bitter, spicy, salty, all came one after another. What a loss! If his hands hadn't been chopped off, if he hadn't, the heavenly demon truly wanted to cry, but no tears came out. The young man didn't hesitate and attacked again. Sword light flashed as if he was facing a great enemy. Another peak-grade supreme martial artist. The heavenly demon let out a blood-curdling shriek as he was stabbed twice more. His soul almost left his body as he howled and fled. Full character hand strike. This old man was not only an expert in using poison. Furthermore, he was a peak low-grade supreme martial artist. Damn, why are there so many legendary experts in the Chongtian continent? The heavenly demon, who was at the end of his rope, did not dare to continue fighting. He immediately changed directions and chose to break out from the direction of the little girl. Let's run first. We'll talk about it when we get back. This time, the heavenly demon didn't even dare to think about attacking this little girl. Baidu search, see the latest chapter. Besides, isn't this young lady already a peak low-grade supreme being? As long as they could leave this place as soon as possible, it would be thanks to the blessings of the devil sect. This place was simply too dangerous. This Chongtian continent was really too strange. Once you meet someone, you can't afford to offend them. Normally, you wouldn't even see these people. However, once Jianghu was injured, they would appear one after another. What kind of world was this? Just as the heavenly demon's body was about to move, the beautiful little girl Arun raised her head and gave him a pure smile. What a beautiful smile! Although the heavenly demon was a ferocious and evil person, he was almost mesmerized by this smile at this moment. Too pure. Too flawless. Too cute. Then, the little girl waved at ZJ with her fair hand. It was as if two white orchids had bloomed in front of ZJ. The sky demon was stunned for a moment and felt an indescribable pain in its body. It screamed like a pig being slaughtered. Oh God! What the hell? Innate poison. In the end, he couldn't even speak properly. He kept muttering, tap tap tap, like the rhythm of a healthy horse trotting on flat ground. If there was someone who was proficient in music by the side, they would almost think that this guy was playing a horse-riding dance. Formless poison was one thing, but innate poison was a terrifying thing that even heavenly demons could not withstand. That senior scholar's first move was to use an invisible poison. It was already abnormal enough. Who would have thought that such an innocent and pure little girl would be even more terrifying, even more terrifying? It was even more vicious. He didn't even greet him. Innate poison was used as soon as he attacked. He was truly unlucky. This time, the heavenly demon really cried. Over there, he had lost both of his hands due to a series of battles. Here, he had been poisoned by an invisible poison. Then he was poisoned by an innate poison. Who did I offend? The heavenly demon once again turned into black smoke and rolled away. With his life nearing its end, the heavenly demon's only thought now was to escape. Wu Jueqing and Chu Lu chased after him. It wasn't that they didn't want to, but that the heavenly demon was really too fast. They wouldn't be able to catch up even if they tired themselves to death. At this moment, the heavenly demon's speed of escape was simply appalling and unimaginable. In the blink of an eye, it had completely disappeared. It was such a godly speed. He was indeed a demon who brought calamity to the world. Seeing the heavenly demon fleeing for his life, Chu Lu frowned in confusion. "Teacher, this is the legendary heavenly demon? That demon who brought calamity to the world?" Wu Jueqing was thinking about something. He said casually, "Yes, this is the legendary heavenly demon." Chu Lu tilted her head. "But this is the power of the so-called demon who brought calamity to the world? It's too weak. Nothing has happened yet and he's already running away crying. If he didn't run away, I would have been able to take care of him. I think he's just running at an exaggerated speed. He doesn't have anything more impressive. What a waste of such a big name." Wu Jueqing was stunned. What was that? An heavenly demon. Such a terrifying existence was actually described as too weak by the great teacher's disciple. It's such a waste of the big boss's reputation. This was really a little ironic. "Little girl, you don't know any better. Don't talk nonsense." Wu Jueqing thought for a while and recalled the fleeting battle just now. He said slowly, "Lass, you're still too inexperienced. How can the heavenly demon be as weak as you described? Of course, I believe you when you say that you can take care of him in his current state. Because this heavenly demon must have suffered fatal injuries, or even life-threatening injuries, that's why he's so weak. Also, did you notice that the heavenly demon's hands are also injured? That's why when he attacked me, he could only use his mouth to bite me. Although it was only a short battle just now, according to my judgment, this heavenly demon's true strength is definitely above the peak of supreme martial artist level, even exceeding the limits of the heaven and earth. If his injuries weren't so severe, the two of us, master and disciple, would most likely have met with misfortune today." Chu naturally did not doubt Master ZJ's judgment. She wrinkled her delicate nose and said, "But this fellow is really a weirdo. He obviously lost both his hands because of his sex, yet he still dares to provoke us. The most interesting thing is that he actually opened his mouth to deal with Master's invisible poison. This is really too fun." Hearing how interesting his disciple's words were, Wu Jueqing couldn't help but laugh. After laughing, he still couldn't help but feel some lingering fear. Even though Wu Jueqing sounded very serious when he spoke to Chu Lu, he was, in fact, trying his best to downplay the heavenly demon's strength. Wu Jueqing had tens of thousands of years of experience. How could he not see the limits of the heavenly demon? Such a demon was really frightening and frightening. It was just that if he said these words to his disciple now, it would be a blow to her confidence. So he still held back. It was just that after thinking for a long time, he still couldn't figure out how such a terrifying fellow could end up in such a state. Wasn't he a little too pitiful? Who was it that was so awesome that they could actually beat the insufferably arrogant heavenly demon to such an extent? He was practically crippled, and smashed into pieces. This was really too admirable. How could there be such a godly person in this heavenly realm? Let's take a few more steps forward. Perhaps the heavenly demon was injured in front. If there's a chance, it's more important to meet those mighty experts who defeated the heavenly demon. Wu Jueqing's eyes were filled with intense interest. The reason why he used those was because the heavenly demon was really too powerful. It was definitely not something a single person could deal with, let alone cripple it to such a state. But Chu nodded hurriedly. The little girl was naturally very interested in the demon slayer hero. The master and disciple quickened their pace. Like two gusts of wind, they quickly disappeared from the main road. The battlefield was a complete mess. At the beginning, the chaos created by Tan Tan and the others covered an area of 10,000 feet. It was like a huge pit. Although Chu Yang and the others had all taken elixirs, they could only barely move. The injuries they had suffered this time were too severe. Everyone sat cross-legged on the ground, meditating to recover their strength and recuperate. Of the 7 people from the 3 Stars Divine Clan, one of them was covered in injuries. There was also Tan Tan who was unconscious. In the battle against the heavenly demon, everyone who participated in the battle had paid a huge price. This was especially the case for Gu Yigu and the other elder. Although the 2 of them were able to preserve their lives with the help of the complete version of the heavy pill, and the injuries on their physical bodies were also gradually recovering and full recovery was within sight, the demonic aura that tainted their bodies couldn't be dispelled. Once the heavenly demon demonic aura came into contact with one's body, it could be said that it was incredibly troublesome. Those whose cultivation wasn't high enough and whose determination wasn't strong enough wouldn't be far from becoming a demon. Even someone like Gu Yigu, who had a high cultivation, would be constantly disturbed by the heavenly demon demonic aura. The moment one's state of mind became unstable, there was still the danger of being demonized. Regarding this, even Chu Yang was helpless. Fortunately, there was always a way out. Chu Yang couldn't do anything about the heavenly demon demonic aura, but that didn't mean that there were other people who could. For example, Tan Tan, the 3 Stars Divine King. Tan Tan himself had a supreme demonic body, which belonged to the ultimate demonic body. The heavenly demon demonic aura was extremely troublesome to ordinary people, but to Tan Tan, it was a very nutritious tonic. Therefore, as long as Tan Tan woke up and used the secret technique to absorb it, everything would be fine. Everyone sat cross-legged and circulated their energy, seizing every second to recover their strength. Right now, they were in the wilderness, which was considered a remote area. Everyone was also in an unprecedented period of absolute weakness. If before they recovered their strength, an expert from the law enforcement team passed by here, then it would really be effortless for them to wipe out the Tribulation Sword Master and the 3 Stars Divine Clan. If they were to be so lucky, everyone would definitely die with everlasting regrets. Everyone felt a sense of urgency. Among them, Chu Yang was in the best condition right now. Apart from concentrating on circulating his energy to recover his internal energy, he also deliberately released his divine senses to keep an eye on the surroundings, protecting everyone and preventing any accidents from happening. However, this thing was really very strange. Just as the old saying went, the good things didn't come true, but the bad things did. Just as everyone was on tenterhooks and desperately recovering their strength, a burst of wind-breaking sound rang out. A black figure rushed over rapidly from afar, as fast as the wind. A person with his hands behind his back, his long hair hanging loosely on both sides, came over. He was neither fast nor slow, leisurely and carefree. This person was the Dharma Supreme, who had returned from the capital. Previously, when the Dharma Supreme discovered that Ghost Sword and Devil Blade had broken the demonic seal before they died, he would rather die than let them off easily. Since the matter had already been done, there was no need for him to rush over. Instead, he chose to return directly. As he walked, he pondered over the matter. It was only when he discovered that dust had filled the sky that he came over to take a look at the situation. Of course, what really attracted him was that there was actually a faint aura of the heavenly demon here. This made the Dharma Supreme very surprised. Shit, people actually fought with this demon to this extent? They actually weren't killed. The Dharma Supreme was getting closer and closer. Chu Yang's divine senses could be said to be unparalleled in the world, at least among those below the heavenly layer. Naturally, he also sensed that somewhat familiar strong aura. He couldn't help but reveal a bitter smile with some despair. This time, it was really over. Chapter 1651. For a moment, Chu Yang didn't know what to feel. He sighed inwardly. How fucking unlucky. The one who came was actually the Dharma Supreme. The person he was most wary of and most afraid of meeting now. What should he do? With the help of the incomplete version of the heavy pill that he had consumed earlier, his originally completely dried up dantian had recovered a certain amount of energy. However, it was only less than half of what it was at its peak. This was a small drawback that came with a huge improvement in cultivation. Previously, as long as he swallowed the incomplete version of the heavy pill, his cultivation and energy would be instantly restored. And the condition of those 4 elders with lighter injuries seemed to be far worse than his. As for Gu Igu and the other elder, although they had consumed the complete version of the heavy pill, their previous injuries were really too severe. At present, they had only managed to preserve their lives and were far from recovering. Not to mention, there was still the disturbance of the demonic aura. Their battle prowess was basically negligible. The strength that he had recovered now was more than enough to deal with ordinary experts. Even if it was against an 8th-grade supreme martial artist, he was confident that he could win. In fact, he might even be able to contend with an ordinary 2nd-grade supreme martial artist. But if it was to deal with a super expert like the Dharma Supreme who was even more powerful than a peak-grade supreme martial artist, they were completely and truly unable to withstand a single blow. Perhaps it was a bit of an exaggeration to say that they were unable to withstand a single blow. However, to say that they were definitely not his match and that their chances of victory were slim was appropriate. If they were really discovered by the Dharma Supreme, then there would be no way for them to escape. Even if Chu Yang could barely escape, the others would definitely be dead. Especially Tan Tan, who was currently in the state of a living dead. However, the Dharma Supreme was currently heading straight in this direction. How could he not discover them? Chu Yang was burning with worry. For the first time, he actually felt that he was lucky. He hoped that a miracle would happen. He prayed in his heart. If a ghost were to appear at this time, feeling the scorching sun in the sky, Minister Chu sighed helplessly. Even if there were ghosts, it seemed like they wouldn't be willing to come out in this kind of weather. The speed of the Dharma Supreme's advance was extremely fast. Although it looked like he was taking a leisurely stroll, in fact, he was shrinking the ground and covering 1,000 miles with each step. In just a short while, he had already come close to where they were. As if he had sensed something, the Dharma Supreme suddenly increased his speed again. The next moment, the Dharma Supreme had already flown to the sky above this huge pit. As he looked around, he couldn't help but feel a wave of astonishment. Then, he felt a sense of satisfaction, as if a huge meat pie had fallen from the sky and landed on his hungry head. What a pleasant surprise! In that instant, even the Dharma Supreme couldn't help but find it hard to believe his own eyes. After taking a closer look, he finally confirmed that all of them were acquaintances. Moreover, they were all great enemies that he had spent a great deal of effort to eliminate. The most amazing thing was that these formidable enemies were all greatly weakened. He believed that as long as he made a move, he would be able to take them down easily. To be able to get rid of so many of them in one go, wouldn't it be a great joy? The heavens are really helping me. Pleased with himself, the Dharma Supreme could not help but throw his head back and roar with laughter. Ha! The wonders of the world. Sure enough, there were all kinds of strange things. If the will of the heavens does not belong to me, why would it send such a great gift to me? Gu Igu and the others' divine senses were far inferior to Chu Yang's. Moreover, they had yet to recover from their serious injuries, so it was only now that they realized that someone had arrived. Everyone was shocked to see that it was actually the Dharma Supreme who had arrived. They almost lost their breath. Chu Yang sighed. Although he was far from replying, he still stood up and said with a smile, "Lord Dharma Supreme, it's been a long time. I wonder if it would be embarrassing for you to still call you Lord Dharma Supreme? Or perhaps, it would be more appropriate to call you Heavenly Demon Lord?" The Dharma Supreme smiled with his hands behind his back. He floated into the huge pit and said with a faint smile, "I have always been lenient towards people who are about to die. Even if I let you have some advantage in words, will you be able to turn the situation around?" Chu Yang said, "Oh? Is Lord Dharma Supreme really so confident? Legend Tribulation has stood tall for 10,000 years. Does Lord Dharma Supreme think that you will be an exception?" The Dharma Supreme smiled gently and said, "In front of me, Tribulation Sword Master, don't think of delaying any longer. Legend Tribulation. The legend has come to an end. Today is the last chapter. Be prepared." Before he finished speaking, almost without warning, he flew out and attacked Chu Yang violently. The moment he attacked, it was as if heaven and earth were falling apart. A long delay was fraught with problems. Chu Yang understood this, so he tried his best to stall for time. The Dharma Supreme had lived for tens of thousands of years longer than him, so he naturally understood this even more. No matter if there were reinforcements, killing this Tribulation Sword Master first was the most correct choice. The only enemies that were of no threat to him were always the dead. As long as he got rid of the Tribulation Sword Master, the so-called legend would be destroyed. Once a legend fell, everything would be easy. Chu Yang let out a long howl, turned his head and shouted, "Kill him! We can settle this once we reach the heavens." He looked as if there was still an ambush and victory was within his grasp. The Dharma Supreme, however, did not even turn his head. He was already in the air above Chu Yang, hundreds of punches and kicks raining down like a torrential waterfall. "You dare to play tricks in front of me? Lord Swordmaster, you are really too childish. Your cheap tricks are all leftovers of mine." As Chu Yang spoke, the Tribulation Sword was already in his hand. His left hand silently took out the last complete version of the heavy pill and stuffed it into his mouth. He didn't want to use the last complete version of the heavy pill, at least not here. But now he had no choice but to use it. With his current strength, he definitely couldn't block the Dharma Supreme's attack. Only when he was at his peak state would he have a chance to deal with the Dharma Supreme. The Tribulation Sword suddenly let out a sharp whistle, and the sword tip unleashed 4 moves at the same time. A ray of cold light pierces 10,000 feet. What harm is there in slaughtering the world? A sharp will buried deep will not change. A gathering of wind and clouds will become the emperor. These 4 moves were unleashed like a volcanic eruption. The Dharma Supreme's body floated in the air, his punches and kicks like the wind, completely suppressing the opponent with his strength. He attacked from a distance wildly. He definitely didn't give Chu Yang's Tribulation Sword a chance to get close to him. He kept hitting the sword light with his punches and kicks that were as heavy as mountains. The continuous heavy attacks were completed in the blink of an eye. Chu Yang let out a muffled groan, spitting out blood as he retreated. He somersaulted a few times, his face pale. The heavy pill in his mouth was swallowed with a gulp. A surge of pure medicinal power instantly spread. But the Dharma Supreme was already chasing closely. "Lord Sword Master, what a pure Tribulation Sword technique. Compared to Junlai back then, it's probably much better. But, you seem to have forgotten who I am. Others may not understand the Tribulation Sword technique, but that definitely doesn't include me. Back then, I had more than once sparred with the Tribulation Sword technique. In terms of familiarity with the Tribulation Sword technique, I'm probably more familiar with it than you are." The Dharma Supreme's voice had a faint but distant and desolate nostalgia. But his mouth was laughing mournfully. The Dharma Supreme struck again, and his power seemed to be even stronger than before. Moreover, although the previous attack was swift and fierce, it still belonged to the category of heavenly-level martial techniques. This time, the palm strike in the air actually brought out an unusually thick black fog, as if it was a giant axe that could split the heavens. It chopped towards Chu Yang, ferocious and terrifying. He sighed lightly. "I really didn't expect the legendary Tribulation Sword Master to actually die in my hands." The meaning of this sentence was somewhat profound. Whoever killed the Tribulation Sword Master was a big deal, but it wasn't something too strange. Only if the Tribulation Sword Master died in the hands of the previous tribulation would it really make one speechless. Before he finished speaking, Chu Yang, who was still spurting blood and should have been completely immobile, suddenly leaped up, sword light flashing. The sword light was tenacious and dense, with a strong rebounding force, its power even stronger than before. The Dharma Supreme was taken aback for a moment, but immediately understood. He said, "I almost forgot that the Tribulation Sword Master has another unique treasure other than the Tribulation Sword, the heavy pill. To recover so quickly, you must have consumed the most complete version, right? I wonder how many more heavy pills you can consume? How many waves of attacks can you withstand?" Chu Yang didn't say anything, desperately performing the Tribulation Sword technique, hoping to hold on for as long as possible. He knew that this could be said to be the most dangerous moment since his rebirth. Even if he said one more word, he was afraid that it would deplete his energy. Why would he reply? It was absolutely courting death to argue with the former Tribulation Transcending Stage think tank. Chu Yang had already tried once, he definitely wouldn't try a second time. What a good sword technique. The Dharma Supreme laughed. As he attacked, he slowly recited, "Iron walls and bronze walls are never at rest, what more can one ask for in life? Clouds and clouds gather, as long as I'm alive, there will be no worries." Good sword technique. At this time, using these few moves is the most suitable. These 4 lines were the names of the Tribulation Sword technique, the moves that Chu Yang was using now. These few moves were a complete defense. The defense was impenetrable and impenetrable. The Dharma Supreme spun and instantly turned into thousands of shadows, surrounding Chu Yang 50 feet away. The thousands of shadows moved as one, attacking wildly with their palms at the same time. It was as if countless monstrous waves had suddenly been set off in the sea, converging from all directions and besieging the already tottering little boat in the middle. The Dharma Supreme knew that once the 4 strongest defensive moves of the Tribulation Sword technique were used, if it was just a single point of attack, and if it wasn't more than 10 times the strength of the opponent, it was impossible to break through. The past Tribulation Sword Masters had used this move to kill countless strong enemies. Because if the enemy couldn't take it down after attacking for a long time, it was inevitable that they would lose their cool. Most of them would choose to engage in close combat. But once they got close, what defense in the world could withstand the sharpness of the Tribulation Sword? Therefore, although this move seemed to be passive defense, it actually contained an extremely secretive strategy to lure the enemy. It was used to defend and counterattack, turning defeat into victory. Could be said to be the best choice. More often than not, some of the more powerful enemies would fall here. As one of the previous tribulations, the Dharma Supreme was also the most important think tank. How could he not know this? Chapter 1652. Of course, it wasn't that the Dharma Supreme didn't want to take action, but Wu Jueqing's aura never relaxed. Instead, it was getting stronger and stronger. The current Wu Jueqing was definitely a volcano on the verge of erupting. The Dharma Supreme was silent for a long time before he finally said, "Brother Wu, why do you think there is a traitor in this world?" Wu Jueqing sneered. "What's so strange about this? Bastards who are born will usually become traitors." The Dharma Supreme smiled lightly and said, "There has never been anyone who wants to betray willingly. You don't understand." He laughed bleakly. "Someone like you who comes from a big family won't understand at all." Wu Jueqing sneered. "Is that so? Are you saying that there is still reason for betraying one's own brother? You actually have the cheek to speak so eloquently? I'd like to hear what you have to say." Chu Lu took the opportunity to use her energy to wrap around Chu Yang and the others, hiding far away at the side. At least, she ensured that Wu Jueqing didn't have to be distracted by other matters. The Dharma Supreme laughed, not taking Chu Lu's actions to heart. He said, "Brother Wu, if I say that I didn't betray back then, what will you do?" Wu Jueqing sneered. "You didn't betray. Could it be that I betrayed back then? Or is it that the meaning of betrayal is the opposite of what you know?" The Dharma Supreme didn't take Wu Jueqing's words to heart. He only looked back at where Chu Yang was with some pity. He smiled bitterly and said, "The opportunity is gone. If we can't kill the Tribulation Sword Master today, I'm afraid our lives will be difficult." Wu Jueqing snorted. Brother Wu, we all have the same experience and have experienced the same betrayal. Why are you still so protective of him today? The Dharma Supreme asked curiously, could it be that you still have some fantasies about the Tribulation Sword Master? Wu Jueqing said, you don't have to worry about this. You've been rambling for so long. Now you're trying to sow discord between us. You still haven't given up and refuse to answer my question directly. What is your intention? You know what I care about the most. You sneak attacked me and plotted against me. I can settle the score with you later. But this time, how did your brother offend you again? Bastard. Explain it to me. The Dharma Supreme smiled and said, Brother Wu, I also know that it is very difficult for me to explain this matter clearly, and even more difficult for the world to acknowledge. Moreover, I don't understand why Brother Wu would care so much about this matter. But this matter has been pressing down on my heart for tens of thousands of years. He had really held it in for a long time. Since Brother Wu is so interested, there's no harm in me talking about it. Once I talk about it, Brother Wu will be able to clear up your doubts. Go on, I'm listening. Wu Jueqing's face was still as calm as water, his murderous intent not reduced in the slightest. His gaze was locked onto the Dharma Supreme. The Dharma Supreme took a deep breath and said, let's not talk about how Jun Lai, the master of the Calamity Sword, treated us then. Just my other 8 brothers, they are definitely the people of my life. My most important brother, if I have a choice as long as I can meet him again, what is this life worth? The brotherhood of the past. Even after tens of thousands of years, he would still be filled with emotions when he thought about it. Just like yesterday. I, Diwu Chouchang, am not a heartless person. When Brother Tribulation united the world, almost all the plans came from me. If I really had second thoughts, I believe that Brother Tribulation would not have made it to the end. I wonder if Brother Wu agrees with this? Wu Jueqing said, yes, when Tribulation became sworn brothers, there are 3 people who are the most important. The first is naturally the master of the Calamity Sword, the second is the think tank, and the third is Brother Tribulation's number 1 person other than the master of the Calamity Sword. After the world was at peace, Jun Lai schemed and planned to use all of us brothers to mend the world and achieve his great cause. Back then, I thought that no matter who among us brothers made it out in the end, as long as he made it out, it would be a victory. However, if I made it out, the effect might be greater. Because I am resourceful, I have plans, I am related to the big picture, and most importantly, I am calm enough. The Dharma Supreme said, if only one of us brothers can survive, then it is most beneficial for me to make it out alive. Does Brother Wu agree with this? Wu Jueqing nodded again. Throughout the generations, the think tanks of Tribulation have always been the wisest of the generation. In terms of destructive power, they might not be below the master of the Calamity Sword. Therefore, back then, I finally decided to use the power of the spirits of my brothers to fight with all my might. The result was that I made it out alive and have been struggling at death's door until today. The Dharma Supreme smiled sadly. Logically speaking, it is indeed best for me to make it out alive. In any case, it should be me alive to create the greatest value. However, in terms of friendship, what right do I have? Why should I be the one to make it out alive? The spirits of the other brothers have all been destroyed, shouldn't the others be alive? What kind of logic is this? For more than 10,000 years, my primordial spirit had been drifting in the wilderness, unable to do anything. Every day I was thinking of my brothers. In the beginning, I was still trying to convince myself, using all kinds of reasons to convince myself. However, it is easy to deceive others, but difficult to deceive oneself. People are the most difficult to deceive themselves. A guilty conscience is a guilty conscience. No reason can justify this. In the end, I understood one thing. One thing that I should have understood long ago, but still couldn't. Between brothers, it is the spirit of brotherhood to live and die together. Even if we die together because of some conspiracy, we can live without regrets. But, when everyone is dead, only you are still alive. Furthermore, you are using the mental energy of your brothers before they died to survive. This kind of guilt, this kind of torment, Do you understand? It turns out that the last person alive is actually the one who suffers the most. The Dharma Supreme spoke with his hands behind his back, his voice exceptionally calm. Wu Jueqing took a deep breath, only to feel bitterness in his mouth. I don't understand? How can I not understand? Didn't I go through this process back then? At most, I just lacked a link compared to you. With guilt and torment, I began to analyze myself again. I made it out alive. In the situation back then, was I selfish at all? The Dharma Supreme smiled bitterly and said, after overturning myself countless times, I gradually realized and confirmed that I was selfish. Back then, when I was about to die, I really did have the thought of, I want to live on. Then I felt even more guilty, even more unbearable. Troubled by guilt, I couldn't live with myself. There were even many times when I thought of self-destructing my primordial soul and ending it all with my death. However, it was my brothers who exchanged all of their divine souls for my survival. How could I die so casually? Hence, I had a new idea. As long as I could get my body again, no matter what, I could do something for my brothers' families. Do a lot of things. No matter what, I would do it to make it up to them. But when I got my body back and cultivated to the point where I could control it, I discovered that my brothers' clans were all gone. Not even a single descendant could be found. Because time doesn't stop. Too much time has passed. And the most ironic thing was that the Diwu clan that I established was the only one left at that time. And it was one of the big clans at that time. However, it was also under attack by tribulation and was in imminent danger. It could be destroyed at any time. Firstly, at that time, I was only at the initial stage of controlling my body. My divine soul wasn't really in perfect harmony with my body, so I couldn't unleash very strong abilities. Secondly, it was also because of my mentality. My brother's descendants were all gone, but my descendants were still around. Why? I've already let them down. I was the only one who survived by using the power of their divine souls. Why should only my descendants continue to exist? Hence, I didn't participate in the battle back then. I watched as the Diwu clan gradually declined. I only said one sentence to Zhuge, one of the tribulations at that time. It was because of this sentence that the Diwu clan avoided the crisis of complete destruction and became a vassal of the Zhuge clan. Then, I began my 10,000-year-long career as the Dharma Supreme. The Dharma Supreme smiled bitterly. During those years when my soul was wandering, there wasn't a moment when I didn't want to do something for my brothers. But in reality, I realized that there was actually nothing I could do. Since that was the case, why did I come out at that time? Every moment I enjoyed a high position and power, I felt even more sorry for my brothers. My brothers risked their lives just to let me enjoy a high position and power here? The Dharma Supreme sighed. Wu Jueqing said angrily, since you feel sorry, then you can live in seclusion and not be the Dharma Supreme, okay? You didn't even make this choice and you still refuse to admit that you were blinded by greed and betrayed them. The Dharma Supreme laughed bitterly. Blinded by greed? Betrayed them? After a long time, I felt more and more guilty. Finally, I started to think of not being the Dharma Supreme so that I wouldn't have to suffer so much inner torment. Wu Jueqing said, yes. You shouldn't be the Dharma Supreme. But anyway, I've already let them down for so many years. If I give up now, not only will I have endured so many years of guilt for nothing, I'll also lose my high position and power? The Dharma Supreme sighed. You bastard! Wu Jueqing was speechless. Never in his wildest dreams would he have thought that there would be such a strange turn of events. It was really like what he said, the desire for power could really erode people's hearts. Even Tribulation's think tank was no exception. The Dharma Supreme laughed bitterly. I also know that my way of doing things is very bastardly. Even thinking about it, I shouldn't have done it. But there are actually only 3 reasons. Firstly, I've already broken the jar. Secondly, the erosion of power and influence, the gradual change in my mentality. Thirdly, they're already dead. And they've already been dead for tens of thousands of years. This is already an established fact. What's the use of persisting? What's the point? So much so that I continued to walk down this path step by step. In the end, it's too late to turn back. Finally, the Dharma Supreme was about to reach his limit. The most heinous person in the heavenly layer, and also the most pitiful person in the heavenly layer, I've poured more effort into this person. Although most people don't like him, and I don't like him either, the twists and turns of his life are almost a history of the evolution of good and evil. Chapter 1653. The Dharma Supreme was in a daze for a moment before he said, "You're not the only one who finds it unbelievable. Even I myself find it unbelievable. But this matter, or rather, the change in my entire person, has really happened. After tens of thousands of years of subtle influence, I actually have no way of turning back. Or perhaps I'm already unwilling to turn back and no longer wish to? Have I changed? Or has this world changed? When all my efforts have failed to bring about the beauty of my desire, when all my struggles have become empty talk, when all my brothers of life and death have become nothing, when I turn back, all I see is hatred. I've changed. I just want to take revenge on everyone in the world. On what basis? We've created peace and prosperity, yet the people who created it don't have a good ending? On what basis can some mediocre people enjoy the fruits of our hard work? On what basis do we have to be so miserable? On what basis do we have to mend the heavens? On what basis? What do we owe them? What should we owe them? If my brothers back then only wanted to be free and unfettered in the martial world, which one of them couldn't do it? Which one of them is worse than the others? All my painstaking efforts, all my loyalty, have become a joke. All my hard work has gone to the benefit of others. I've changed. I've changed and am no longer who I used to be. From the first time I killed someone for power, and a good person at that, I've continued on this path. One wrong step led to many wrong steps. Later on, I gave up on myself. In order to harmonize my spirit, I cultivated demonic techniques, and it got even more out of hand. Now, I've even gotten in touch with the extraterrestrial demons, and even I myself have become a half-demon. I've completely sunk deep into the mud. A single slip leads to everlasting sorrow, and when I look back, 100 years have passed. I've not only lived for 100 years, I've lived for 1,000 years, or even 10,000 years. This is my current state of mind. What loyalty? What right do I have to say these two words? The Dharma Supreme laughed bitterly. These two words have long been cut off from me. My brothers are all dead. Even if I'm loyal to them, who should I talk to? To other people in this world? Are they even worthy? But, Wu Jueqing said furiously, but those brothers of yours didn't die at all. At least they didn't die under your so-called conspiracy. This sentence that came out of Wu Jueqing's mouth was like a sudden storm, earth-shattering. Not dead? My brother is not dead. The Dharma Supreme was stunned. His eyes suddenly widened, and he stared blankly like a wooden chicken. It was like a sudden clap of thunder. It landed squarely on his head. If Wu Jueqing could strike at this moment, he would definitely be able to attack a completely defenseless Dharma sovereign. Killing him with a single strike was definitely not an extravagant hope. The Dharma Supreme raised his head abruptly and took a step forward. He stared at Wu Jueqing with a burning gaze. His originally calm voice became abnormally anxious. What did you say? What did you just say? Say it again and make it clear. Wu Jueqing looked at him pitifully and said, I said, those brothers of yours actually didn't die. The Dharma Supreme mumbled as if he had lost his soul. He couldn't help but stagger back a step. He knew that no matter how one looked at it, it was impossible for Wu Jueqing to lie to him about this matter. For a moment, he couldn't help but feel a little absent-minded. This time, he was truly absent-minded. Even his eyes were empty. He lost control again. If Wu Jueqing were to strike, he could still take down the Dharma Supreme instantly. A wise man could actually lose his mind multiple times in a short conversation. Such a situation was really extremely rare. But Wu Jueqing still didn't strike. Because he and the Dharma Supreme had almost the same experience. At such a time, how could he strike? He could only sigh in his heart. Then, Then where are they? The Dharma Supreme took a deep breath, and his gaze became unusually sharp. Back then, the Tribulation Sword Master, your boss, or rather my boss. Perhaps only he himself had truly perished. He used the complete collapse of his body and spirit to open up a passage for the brothers, so that the brothers could go to the extraterrestrial to battle the extraterrestrial demons. Wu Jueqing sighed and said, the process of the matter was like this. He recounted everything that Chu Yang had told him in detail. Wu Jueqing had always believed that the Dharma Supreme had the right to know this secret. Therefore, even though the enmity between them was as deep as the ocean, Wu Jueqing had always insisted that even if he wanted to kill the Dharma Supreme, it must be after he had told him this. The Dharma Supreme didn't speak throughout Wu Jueqing's narration. He listened quietly, his expression still calm, except for the occasional spasm of his facial muscles. It was an involuntary spasm that would break out from time to time. When Wu Jueqing said the words, "Send my brothers to the extraterrestrial to battle the extraterrestrial demons," the expression on the Dharma Supreme's face became indescribably complicated. He wanted to cry, to laugh, to scream hysterically, yet he still tried his best to control himself. His expression was so tragic that one couldn't bear to continue watching. The muscles at the corners of the Dharma Supreme's mouth kept twitching and squirming. He clenched his teeth but couldn't. He bit his lower lip between his teeth, but it was also bitten until it was dripping with blood, dripping down the corners of his mouth. He stared at Wu Jueqing but didn't speak at all. Not a single word. Wu Jueqing finished recounting the entire matter. The Dharma Supreme still didn't speak. He maintained his silence, standing there stiffly. For a moment, the atmosphere seemed to have frozen. An indescribable sense of oppression, an indescribable sorrow, slowly spread. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. One by one, silhouettes landed here as if they were flying. They were Gu Duxing and the others. When Gu Duxing and the rest saw such a scene, they were all shocked. Chu Yang, Tan Tan and the rest were lying down and sitting a little further away. No one was standing. The only two people standing were the Dharma Supreme and Wu Jueqing. And such powerful enemies actually didn't fight when they stood together. This strange scene was too shocking, and it seemed to be a little too difficult to comprehend. The moment Mo Qingwu saw Chu Yang's bloodied and pathetic state, she couldn't accept it. She felt her mind shake and suddenly, she saw stars and almost fainted. It was as if the sky had collapsed at this moment. She almost lost all consciousness. With a scream, she rushed over. Chu Yang, what happened to you? Before Mo Lei could hold her back, Mo Qingwu had already rushed out. At this moment, other than the severely injured Chu Yang, there was nothing else in her eyes. The whole world was no longer in her eyes. Vilev is unlucky. We'll go with him immediately. This was the only thought in Mo Qingwu's mind at this moment. The Tribulation brothers moved together. Sabers and swords were drawn, viburnum flowers in their hands. They looked at the Dharma Supreme with burning eyes. Because Mo Qingwu had charged right past the Dharma Supreme. She was completely defenseless and defenseless. If the Dharma Supreme dared to move, the brothers would immediately fight with their lives. However, the Dharma Supreme unexpectedly didn't move. Not only did he not move, just by looking at his reaction, it was as if he didn't even notice the arrival of Gu Duxing and the rest. He just stood there in a daze, as if he had lost his soul and was distracted. Gu Duxing and the rest finally heaved a sigh of relief. They still maintained their defensive state, walking over in batches and going around from the side to check on Chu Yang's condition. The Dharma Supreme and Wu Jueqing still maintained their face-to-face situation. At this moment, the Dharma Supreme seemed to have directly turned into a clay puppet. A cool breeze blew, lifting his black robe and making rustling sounds. At this moment, the Dharma Supreme only had one feeling. That was the feeling of being abandoned by the whole world. That kind of desolation, that kind of loneliness and vicissitudes of life. There was also a kind of sadness, regret and helplessness. After a long, long time, an extremely dense black aura suddenly emerged from the Dharma Supreme. Wu Jueqing's eyes narrowed. The aura of the extraterrestrial demon. The aura of the extraterrestrial demon had reappeared. This meant that the Dharma Supreme had made a choice. The aura of the extraterrestrial demon on the Dharma Supreme became thicker and thicker, almost enveloping his entire body. With an extremely bitter laugh, the Dharma Supreme waved his hand, dispersing the demonic fog that shrouded his head. His face was revealed again. He let out a long sigh and said with an unknown meaning, "Send my brother to battle the extraterrestrial demons in the outer realm. Nurture my brother to reconstruct his physical body and become an immortal golden body. Fulfill my brother's wish to command the outer realm and achieve immortal achievements. Let my brother enjoy the glory and splendor of the world and receive the highest honor." So this is the case. So everything is a misunderstanding. So we have misunderstood Big Brother. So, it's too late, too late? The Dharma Supreme laughed softly, but his laughter was even worse than crying. It was filled with endless desolation and loneliness. For a moment, it was as if he had lost his soul and his soul had left his body. If I had known about it 30,000 years ago, why would I have spent so much effort to destroy Big Brother's plan? If I had known about it 10,000 years ago, why would I have become the Dharma Supreme? Even if I couldn't find them, at least I could have committed suicide to lessen some of the guilt. Even if I had only known about it 3,000 years ago, no matter what choice I made, I wouldn't have painstakingly planned to deal with the Tribulation Sword Master. If I had known about it 100 years ago, I would still have been willing to give up all my honor and glory, disperse all my cultivation and return to being a wandering soul. But now, so what now? If you have not lost your original intention, there is still a way to turn back. The extraterrestrial demon is just a thought. Wu Jueqing said. After all, they were all tribulations. If there was anyone in the world who understood the Dharma Supreme's current state of mind the most, other than Wu Jueqing, there was no one else. The extraterrestrial demon is just a thought. The Dharma Supreme laughed bitterly. Wu Jueqing. Take a look, what is this? With a swoosh, he activated the demonic aura, causing the demonic fog to float in front of him again. He pointed at it with his fingers, gritting his teeth fiercely. What is this? What is my brother going to do? And what am I? He looked up to the sky and roared, "My brother is going to fight the extraterrestrial demon, to fight the extraterrestrial demon for mankind. And I am the extraterrestrial demon now. For my own selfish desires, I did not hesitate to transform into a demon and wreak havoc in the human world. Even if my original intention remains the same, can I still turn back?" Chapter 1654. The Dharma Supreme suddenly took a few steps forward. Having lost all sense of reason, he actually grabbed Wu Jueqing's collar without a care in the world. He was completely defenseless and could only grit his teeth as he asked, "Tell me what? Can still turn back? How can I still turn back? How can I still have the face to turn back? Who am I? What am I? What was I in the past? What am I now?" Wu Jueqing's cultivation was fully concentrated and he could counterattack at any time. He was even confident that he could escape unscathed while severely injuring the Dharma Supreme. However, he didn't do anything and just let the Dharma Supreme grab his collar and yell, "I'm no longer human, I'm a demon. Actually, I've long stopped being human. How many people have I killed for my own selfish desires? How many good people have I killed?" The Dharma Supreme yelled at Wu Jueqing, "Do you know? You're better than me. You were fucking framed by me after you came out and didn't even have time to commit any sins. How fucking easy for you. But what about me? What about me? What did I plan for so many years for? What's the point? How many people have I killed openly and covertly in the headquarters of the law enforcement officers who opposed me? Those people, which one of them wasn't a hero in the past? Which one of them wasn't a hero full of righteousness? And which one of them wasn't an upright law enforcement officer in the martial world? But I wanted to take revenge on the Tribulation Sword Master. They stopped me, so I killed them. This time, not only did my heart turn into a demon, even my body has turned into a demon from head to toe. All the higher-ups of the law enforcement officers were wiped out by me. These people, which one of them wasn't a hero admired by the world? It's these heroes that were all demonized by me. Demonized by me. How much sin have I committed? Can I still turn back? After I've committed so many evil deeds, all of you are telling me now that I was wrong. My brothers are still alive. My big brother did it for our own good. Everything was my own misunderstanding. Boo. The Dharma Supreme howled, tears rolling down his cheeks. Heavens! Why are you doing this? Why are you doing this? Why are you doing this? Why was that? At this moment, even though they were enemies, Gu Duxing and the others still couldn't help but feel sorry for him. They thought of how the Dharma Supreme's entire life had been led astray by a freak combination of factors, with no way of turning back. Yet at the very last moment, when there was no turning back, he found out the truth. That kind of desolation. He sighed inwardly, hearing about the Dharma Supreme, such a formidable character of the world. At this moment, the top experts were sobbing so bitterly that they almost cried at the same time. This kind of powerhouse, the number one power, a peak-level supreme being, and even the legendary calamity hero. It might not even make him frown. Even if he was at the end of his road, he might not be able to change his expression. Even if his soul was scattered, he might not lose his composure in front of everyone. But at this moment he was crying in front of everyone. She cried without any care for her image. How many people would be able to understand such a feeling? The Dharma Supreme released his grip on Wu Jueqing's collar in despair, retreating stiffly in a daze. His hands were still outstretched, but they were trembling violently. Suddenly, he looked up to the sky and shouted, "So it turns out that my perseverance for tens of thousands of years has been completely destroyed. It's just a misunderstanding, a joke? The people that I hate so much are actually the people who treat me the best, willing to sacrifice everything for me. The people who want to make me successful. My selfishness has harmed the strength of my brothers. I have indirectly ruined Big Brother's sacrifice. All of my plans had become meaningless. They had even caused harm, destruction, and destruction. This is what I have done, my original intention? My turning back? Is it possible? Is it possible?" The Dharma Supreme laughed bitterly. The demonic fog and evil aura around him became thicker and thicker. Wu Jueqing looked at him quietly and said, "It's not too late. You still have the chance to turn back. As long as you still have the heart, you can turn back." The Dharma Supreme shook his head sadly. "I have no chance. I have no chance. I can no longer turn back. I have already done everything to the extreme. Where do I have the heart? I can no longer turn back. I am destined to never turn back." The Dharma Supreme laughed. Suddenly, he turned around and shouted crazily, "Calamity Sword Master Chu Yang. Come out and show me your Calamity Sword." Chu Yang had just woken up from his coma when he saw Chu Lu and Mo Qingwu. The two girls were watching him intently. At the same time, he could clearly feel the extreme pain and numbness all over his body, as well as the recovery of a large amount of internal energy in his dantian. All these signs indicated that he had taken the heavy pill again, and it was the complete version. It was just that he didn't know if it was from Chu Lu or Mo Qingwu. Just as he was about to say something to comfort the two little girls in front of him, he heard a thunderous roar. "Calamity Sword Master Chu Yang. Come out and show me your Calamity Sword." He raised his head reluctantly, only to see the Dharma Supreme standing not far away from him. His black robe and long hair fluttered in the wind. Only his eyes were staring at him somewhat crazily. Chu Yang couldn't help but be startled. The Dharma Supreme was one of the few wise men in the world. He was the calmest and most stable. Such a situation shouldn't have happened to him. Now that there was such a change, there could only be one result. He turned around and saw Wu Jueqing nodding lightly at him. Having received confirmation, Chu Yang's mind stirred. The Calamity Sword suddenly appeared in midair with a sword cry. It still emitted a dazzling glow. Just like that, a sword stood upright in midair. The Dharma Supreme's frenzied emotions instantly became as calm as ice. The wise man of the past had returned at this moment. However, he still didn't make any movements. He just stood there, looking up at the calamity sword in the air with a myriad of emotions in his eyes. One could clearly see how many memories he had in the past were flowing through his mind at this moment. How much of the past flowed through his heart? The brothers who had gone through life and death together, the big brother who was loyal to him, the glorious years of blood and blood, the flowing years that had passed by. The sword light flashed, as if the former big brother Qinfang was looking at him with sparkling eyes. The calamity sword was still the same as before. Big brother, where are you? Do you know that I have hated you for so many years? I was wrong. I want to repent to you, but where are you? Tears gradually gathered in the Dharma Supreme's eyes, sparkling. Then, they quietly flowed down from the corners of his eyes. They dripped onto the ground, splashing up light dust. He stood straight and looked at the calamity sword in the air. Slowly his body, which had been standing straight, began to hunch down. In an instant he seemed to have aged a few thousand years, unable to even straighten his back. The vicissitudes of the past. The brotherhood is boundless, vaguely drinking in the dream, startled by the cold, sitting opposite the moon, made a mistake by gathering iron. How can I describe the melancholy of my life? My hands are stained with the blood of heroes, every step under my feet is a challenge, gnashing my teeth and hating the mistakes of heaven. My nightmare caused my brother to be wronged, my sins can't be redeemed by heaven, my hands are bloody and my soul is ashamed. I have let down my brothers in tears, difficult for my brother, difficult for heaven, full of remorse and bitterness, can't retreat, can't advance, ha! The Dharma Supreme sang loudly. His voice was mournful, almost as if he was better off dead. As he sang till here, he suddenly laughed hoarsely. His laughter was much more miserable than crying. Then, with a wail, he suddenly knelt down, facing the calamity sword. He kowtowed heavily. I'm sorry. Big brother, I'm sorry. I Diwu Chochang, I'm sorry. Brothers, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. The Dharma Supreme jumped up. He howled into the sky, I'm wrong. But I'm destined to be unable to turn back. Heaven is playing with me. What should I do? Heaven, if you really have eyes, why would you play with me like this? Why are you playing with me like this? The Dharma Supreme howled into the sky, almost going crazy. Previously, he was still thinking about it. The Dharma Supreme who kept saying that heavens will belong to him was now doing everything he could. He was scolding the heavens for being unfair. Was heaven really playing with him? Wu Jueqing, who was at the side, was also almost in tears. He was definitely the one who understood the Dharma Supreme the most, because he, too, was almost on the path of the Dharma Supreme. Fortunately, he had stopped on the wrong path right from the start, and the one who stopped him was actually the Dharma Supreme. It was just that he really didn't hate the Dharma Supreme for his sneak attack back then. If not for that sneak attack back then, there would probably be another pitiful person who scolded heaven's will for playing with him today. From this point of view, the Dharma Supreme was actually Wu Jueqing's greatest benefactor. But the Dharma Supreme who stopped him from going down the wrong path was already destined to be unable to turn back. From an unparalleled hero to a peerless hero, then to a traitor who stole the world, and finally to a demon who brought calamity to the world. The Dharma Supreme walked step by step, and finally, today, when he was powerless to turn back, he found out the truth. How cruel and helpless was this? Step by step, it made one sigh. If there wasn't heaven's will to guide him, to walk step by step like this until now. It was really inconceivable. After the Dharma Supreme roared into the sky, he quieted down just like that. He stood there quietly, like a dead man. For a moment, everyone didn't know what to say. Then, the Dharma Supreme turned around quietly and faced Wu Jueqing. Brother Wu, thank you for telling me. Haha, for the sneak attack back then, should Brother Wu hate me or thank me? At this time, he could actually still laugh. It was just that when he spoke to Wu Jueqing about the sneak attack back then, his tone was full of envy. They were the same. Wu Jueqing could turn back, he could go back. As long as there was a chance, he could still join the original group. But what about himself? Even if the brothers could still accept it, even if Big Brother didn't care, but how could he go back? How could he still have the face to go back? Not to mention bringing his half-demon body back with him? Wu Jueqing opened his mouth, but realized that whatever he said was inappropriate. I still have to walk down this path. I can no longer turn back. The Dharma Supreme took a deep breath and said expressionlessly, Sword Master Chu, the Tianding Grand Meeting is the time of the final battle between you and me. If your skills are not as good as mine, don't blame me for being ruthless. If I win, heaven's will belong to me. If you win, the tribulation will start a new chapter. Everyone, let's fight it out at the Tianding Grand Meeting. So what if I live? So what if I die? Let me be wrong until the end. The Dharma Supreme let out a long roar and flew up, leaving behind rolling demonic fog in the air. He actually left without a care. Chapter 1655. As the Dharma Supreme left, soft puffing sounds could be heard in the air. Following the direction where the Dharma Supreme left, droplets of water fell from the sky, sparkling under the sunlight and dripping into the soil. Everyone knew that these were the Dharma Supreme's tears. It was obvious that this generation's think tank could no longer control his emotions. Even when he was flying at such a high speed, there were still so many tears falling. Everyone looked at one another, all of them speechless. No one stopped him. No one thought of stopping him. Why does he refuse to turn back when he already knows the truth? GMO said somewhat angrily, since he knows that he was wrong and understands that what happened back then was a misunderstanding, why doesn't he turn back? Is selfish desire really that important? Don't his brothers from back then miss him? If he doesn't turn back, how can his brothers endure it? Turn back? How can he turn back? How can he turn back? Gu Duxing said coldly, law enforcement officers, heroes from all walks of life who once ruled the world and whose names shook the heavens, have basically all been destroyed in his hands. He has completely destroyed the foundation of the law enforcement officers. The entire heavens continent will be plunged into an eternal land of chaos because of his actions this time. Although the law enforcement officers have been somewhat corrupted over the years because of the Dharma Supreme, without the restrictions of the law enforcement officers, this continent will be 10,000 times more chaotic than before, or even more. Even if he repents and turns back now, it will be of no use. The impact he has caused has already become a foregone conclusion. Even if he changes his mind at the last minute, it will no longer be of much significance. On the contrary, it may cause even greater and more lasting trouble. Gu Duxing sighed deeply. In fact, a hero and wise man like the Dharma Supreme naturally has his own thoughts. If he continues to persist in his wrong ways, it may be true repentance. If he were to repent at this moment and commit suicide to atone for his sins, then the entire world would truly be finished. What exactly are you talking about? Why don't I understand? Whatever, what do you think we should do next? Luo Kadi was completely perplexed. Do we still have to fight to the death in the future? Chu Yang coughed and said, Of course, the Dharma Supreme said it very clearly just now. It's one thing for him to know that he was wrong. But he can no longer turn back, so the battle still has to continue. If he could kill us, he wouldn't show any mercy, and vice versa. Therefore, the road ahead was still bumpy. The road is still filled with blood. Everyone still needs to work hard. GMO, Luo Kadi, and the others were still somewhat confused. However, what was in common was that for a hero like the Dharma Supreme, one of the legendary tribulations of the past, to end up in such a situation today, everyone could only sigh and lament in their hearts. Fortunately, it was the Dharma Supreme who encountered such an incident. I'm afraid that the only choice I would have had would have been to destroy my body and soul as soon as possible. Xie Danqiong rejoiced and said. All the brothers heard Xie Danqiong's words. He thought of all the things that the Dharma Supreme had gone through. When they thought about what would happen to them, they couldn't help but shudder. He nodded in agreement. If he continued to live like this, it would be a fate worse than death. Let's go back. A war is inevitable. So, let's go all out. Chu Yang said. Mo Qingwu scooped Chu Yang up in her arms. Hugging Chu Yang's tall and majestic body seemed very out of place, but she refused to let go even if she had to die. She just carefully held on to him. The brothers left step by step. After walking for a long distance, they still couldn't help but turn back. The Dharma Supreme's helpless and sorrowful roar before he left still seemed to reverberate. Wu Jueqing was the last to leave. He stood despondently for a long time before he said softly, "Diwu Chocheng, thank you." He was referring to the Dharma Supreme's sneak attack on him back then. He used to hate his sneak attack so much. But now, he realized that if it wasn't for that sneak attack and his serious injuries, he probably wouldn't be much stronger than the Dharma Supreme right now. The wonders of the world were simply unimaginable. On the other side, the Dharma Supreme sped all the way back to the secret gathering place of the law enforcement officers. It was just that the journey was very peaceful, very peaceful. If it was before, the Dharma Supreme would definitely be thinking about many, many things, such as plotting against whom, or how to improve his cultivation, or... The reason why it was peaceful was because the Dharma Supreme's mind was completely blank at this moment. Or rather, it wasn't appropriate to say that it was completely blank, because in the bottom of the Dharma Supreme's heart, there was always a thunderous voice calling out to him. Chocheng, what do you think of this place? Chocheng, what do you think? Chocheng, where are you? Fifth brother, where are you now? Fifth brother, why aren't you here yet? Fifth brother, everyone is waiting for you. Fifth brother, how are you now? Fifth brother, come back quickly. The voices of his brothers seemed to be constantly ringing. The Dharma Supreme howled and covered his face as he ran. He covered his face tightly. The Dharma Supreme covered his face and ran while choking with sobs. The faces of his brothers flashed before his eyes. Some of their faces, after tens of thousands of years, had been blurred, but now they were incomparably clear. Even the expressions on their faces were the same as before. They were calling for me, they were calling for me. But I could only cover my face and run. I miss all of you too, but I can't, I'm no longer worthy. The Dharma Supreme ran against the wind, forcibly suppressing the endless bitterness in his heart, but he still felt waves of choking and indescribable sobs. The whistling wind that came towards him had already dried up the tears that had just overflowed from his eyes. He didn't know what he was thinking in his heart. He only felt that his heart was suddenly burning like a ball of fire, and then suddenly cold like ice. If tragedy is inevitable in life, then what is my life? Is it considered a tragedy? Or is it a farce? A farce that I directed and acted in myself, thinking that I was infallible and doing things on my own. Messing up everything. I thought that everyone owed me, but in the end, I was the biggest debtor. No matter who it is, I owe it to them. The Dharma Supreme suddenly felt an extremely absurd feeling. For a moment, he actually wanted to laugh at the sky, shout at the sky, or curse at the sky. Complain that the heavens were playing tricks on him, that the heavens were unfair. For a moment, it was as if he wanted to kill everyone in the world, leaving nothing behind. All living beings were exterminated, and for a moment, they wanted to destroy themselves, their souls scattered, consigned to eternal damnation. So everything was actually a mistake. So the one who made the most mistakes was actually myself, selfish from the start. Then, blinded by greed, I fell deeper and deeper, to the point where the heavens and earth can no longer tolerate it, and there is no way back. Full of regret, full of bitterness, unable to retreat, unable to advance. Diwu Chocheng, where should I go from here? Diwu Chocheng, you were once revered by the world, and a hero that everyone looked up to. You also had a place in the legends of the heavenly realm. You had the reputation of tribulation throughout history. You also had your glory, overturning the heavenly realm tens of thousands of years ago. As tribulation's think tank, you led the entire situation, and it was only because of your planning that the brothers could unite the heavenly realm that time. Now, what have you become? The Dharma Supreme of today. Are you still the Diwu Chocheng of the past? Are you still the tribulation's think tank? Diwu Chocheng? Dharma Supreme? Tribulation's think tank? Heavenly demon seed? Hero? Devil? Troublemaker? Where should I go from here? Where should I go from here? Where should I go from here? The Dharma Supreme felt that his heart was about to explode. The Dharma Supreme suddenly stopped outside the forest, looking up at the sky, speechless, his face full of confusion. He really couldn't retreat, neither could he advance. For a moment, he couldn't make a choice, and there was no way forward. For a moment, he couldn't advance or retreat. Lord Dharma Supreme. The two law enforcement experts who were on guard outside the forest came out of hiding and bowed. The Dharma Supreme took a deep breath and exhaled gently. He quickly restrained his emotions and said indifferently, "That person, has he returned?" The two guards said, "He has already returned, but he seems to be very badly injured. Now, he is sending people everywhere to look for Lord Dharma Supreme." The Dharma Supreme's expression was neither happy nor angry, and only nodded indifferently. "I know." He floated and entered the dense forest. The moment he entered, he could clearly feel a wave of scattered demonic aura, faintly rising and overflowing, with a vague feeling that it would dissipate at any time. This feeling was very strange. Even when he first met the heavenly demon, he didn't seem to be in such a miserable state. It seemed that the heavenly demon's injuries this time were indeed extremely serious, enough to be fatal, even more so than that day. The Dharma Supreme walked over with a gloomy face. One after another, weak moans that were forcefully suppressed came out from inside almost continuously. Just by hearing these sounds, one could imagine how much pain the person who was moaning was in. "You are back? You are finally back." The heavenly demon's voice was extremely weak. "Come over quickly, come over quickly." The Dharma Supreme's eyes flashed and his figure disappeared. He instantly entered the house and turned a corner on the wall. Immediately, the door to a secret chamber appeared. The Dharma Supreme entered in a flash. The wall behind him slowly closed up. "Hurry!" The heavenly demon withered in the secret chamber, his whole body almost shriveled up. Demonic aura constantly flowed out from his body and disappeared into the air. As the demonic aura gradually flowed out, his aura became even weaker. Now, he was like a candle in the wind, on the verge of death, and could die at any time. Previously, he was seriously injured and was also poisoned by the unique poison in the world. Now, the heavenly demon really didn't even have the strength to move. It was already very lucky to be able to return here. If not for the Dharma Supreme, his last hope, he could only wait for death. "Hurry, prepare a few embryonic devil souls of supreme martial artists and above, the more the better. Don't be too strong, just second or third grade supreme martial artist embryonic devil souls to strengthen my foundation," the heavenly demon said weakly. "If I don't get replenishment soon, I will vanish into thin air. Hurry up and prepare them, hurry. With your strength, how did you get injured so badly?" The Dharma Supreme frowned and asked slowly. Chapter 1656. All kinds of weird things can happen in this damned place. It's my bad luck. I met the Demon King the moment I made my move. The heavenly demon gritted his teeth in hatred. It was originally nothing much. I just had to hold on a little longer and I would have won the battle and even gotten the rare supreme demon body. But for some reason, a strange sword came and ruined my plans. Then, I met two experts who could use the Heaven's Peak poison. Why are you still asking about this at this juncture? Hurry up and prepare. The faster the better, hurry up. You're so badly injured. What kind of spirit would be the best for you? Do you want the spirit of a second grade or third grade supreme martial artist? Do you need a special catalyst? The Dharma Supreme was a little anxious, but his words were clear and he asked in great detail. No need. Just a second grade or third grade one will do. Hurry up and prepare. Cut the crap. So, just an ordinary one will do. Hurry up and prepare. The faster the better. But sir, you also know that the ones we demonized previously were all high-level martial artists, such as the second grade and third grade supreme martial artists. I didn't put in much effort, but I realized that I couldn't completely control their spirits. This is a little troublesome. If an accident happens when you're replenishing them, why are you so silly? What's the big deal? You just have to do this and that, Oh, I see. Sir's words are very righteous and I've benefited a lot. Oh right, when I went out today, my spirit was also injured and I realized that I couldn't completely control it. Does this have anything to do with the strength of my spirit? Of course it has something to do with it. Why do you have so much to say? Hurry up and prepare. For example, I can't control anyone now. This is all related to the brand of the devil's soul. The weaker the devil's soul, the lower the control. If the devil's soul is on the verge of collapse, the brand can't be maintained. Hurry up and go. Hurry up and prepare. Oh, I see. Sir, you're really honest. I've figured it all out. What do you mean? The heavenly demon finally felt that something was wrong. The Dharma Supreme laughed coldly. I'm just saying that you're really fucking honest as a pig. A pig waiting to be slaughtered. The heavenly demon was stunned for a moment before it reacted. It let out a shrill cry, "How dare you say that about me?" Up until now, he had felt that something was wrong. Yet, he still did not suspect the Dharma Supreme. The Dharma Supreme stood with his hands clasped behind his back, his expression gentle and refined as usual. Yet, he said, "Don't you understand what I'm saying? Don't you understand human language? You're a demon, so it's reasonable that you don't understand human language. I'll say one more thing. Fuck you. Do you understand? Can you?" The heavenly demon was so infuriated that the demonic aura all over his body was about to explode. Panting heavily, he looked at the Dharma Supreme and said, "You scoundrel. Demon child, you actually... How dare I scold you?" The Dharma Supreme smiled. "Not only do I want to scold you, I want to hit you. Don't worry, I'll fuck you. But you are definitely not my demon child." As he spoke, he slapped the extraterrestrial demon hard in the face. The sound was exceptionally crisp and clear. "I want you to die." The heavenly demon was mad with anger. Completely disregarding his injuries, he tried his best to activate the demonic soul brand. The Dharma Supreme frowned and instantly felt an extreme pain exploding in his mind. However, this pain was not as unbearable as before. In fact, the pleasure was gradually diminishing. Looks like the extraterrestrial demon is really honest. What he said was absolutely right. This was the final radiance of the setting sun and there was nothing he could do anymore. His demonic soul had obviously suffered great damage. After this, he would no longer be able to control himself. He couldn't help but feel relieved that he had gotten rid of this last burden. No matter what he chose in the future, he would be able to do as he pleased. The Dharma Supreme confirmed his judgment. Completely disregarding the fact that the extraterrestrial demon was still activating his demonic soul, he slapped the extraterrestrial demon's face more than 10 times consecutively. He growled, "You control me? You control me?" Every time he slapped her, he would ask her a question. The pain in his mind continued, but his hands did not stop slapping. "You control me? Who do you think you are? You actually want to control me? You're a demon child that deserves to be cut into pieces. You're a demon who deserves to die. You've schemed well, you've harmed me well. You bastard who deserves to die 10,000 times." Slap after slap, the pain in the Dharma Supreme's mind continued. The extraterrestrial demon's final counterattack was no small matter, but the Dharma Supreme did not show it on his face. At this moment, he could only humiliate the extraterrestrial demon as much as he could. Drops of black demonic blood flowed out from the extraterrestrial demon's mouth and wounds almost continuously, turning into drops of demonic energy and dissipating in the air. The extraterrestrial demon was extremely aggrieved and indignant, but also extremely aggrieved. He glared at the Dharma Supreme, wishing he could swallow him whole. He would never have thought that when he returned here, he thought that it was his fledgling that healed him. Who would have thought that this fellow would actually betray him? This change made the extraterrestrial demon feel like he was dreaming. How could it be possible that the fledgling that he had manipulated with his own hands actually betrayed him? It could even resist the restriction of the law of the superior controlling the inferior. That law that no one had been able to resist since ancient times. It was even more terrifying than encountering a nightmare in the land of nightmares. He really did not dare to believe it. The Dharma Supreme clenched his teeth. He grabbed the extraterrestrial demon's hair with his left hand and lifted him up. His right hand slapped him continuously, his gaze cold like an ice-cold blade. My life has been ruined by you extraterrestrial demons. The Dharma Supreme slapped him again. This sentence was not wrong in a detailed analysis. The original mission of the Tribulation's Sword Master and Tribulation was to deal with the extraterrestrial demon. All the misunderstandings also originated from this. You caused me to betray my brothers. You caused me to be betrayed by everyone. You caused me to lose my humanity. You caused me to be in a dilemma. You caused me to be in a dilemma. You caused me to. The more the Dharma Supreme spoke, the more aggrieved he became. Suddenly he stabbed 2 fingers into the extraterrestrial demon's eyes. He was already in a state of madness now. What was a mere pain? Being able to wreak havoc on the extraterrestrial demon's body was the greatest pleasure right now. The extraterrestrial demon let out a scream that was worse than death. His whole body trembled and the demonic fog became chaotic. The Dharma Supreme did not stop. He continued to attack, his methods becoming more and more cruel. The extraterrestrial demon's body was gradually dismantled into pieces. With a loud cry that was close to breaking down, the Dharma Supreme slapped the extraterrestrial demon's head for the last time. At this point, the extraterrestrial demon let out a low murmur of unknown meaning and finally breathed his last. A pitiful heaven-level extraterrestrial demon, a demon that was above heaven-level martial artists in the Heaven Imperial Court, would never have dreamed that he would die in such a humiliating manner in the Heaven Imperial Court. To die so, that even he himself could not believe it. The next moment, an extremely dense demonic fog erupted from the top of the extraterrestrial demon's head. That was the appearance of the extraterrestrial demon's original soul. It was also where the last imprint of this extraterrestrial demon was. The Dharma Supreme laughed loudly, as if he had gone mad. He stretched out both his hands and a ball of pitch-black demonic aura suddenly emerged. He opened his mouth and sucked the pure demonic aura that was transformed from the extraterrestrial demon's soul into his mouth continuously. You devour this. Devour that. Today I will devour you. I will let you have a taste of being devoured and consigned to eternal damnation. Game? To hell with your game. Game my ass. He smashed the chest of the extraterrestrial demon's body with a vicious punch and dug out the demon spirit's heart. He opened his mouth and stuffed it into his mouth, then violently smashed his danton. I will devour you. I will devour you, you bastards. You are the main culprit, the extraterrestrial demon. The Dharma Supreme roared in a low voice. His eyes revealed utter hatred and insanity. At this moment, the extraterrestrial demon's body could no longer be described as incomplete. It was completely fragmented, but the Dharma Supreme still refused to relax. He continued to curse and scold without letting go, until the extraterrestrial demon's entire body completely disappeared from the secret chamber. Not a single bit was left. The Dharma Supreme slowly got up and suddenly laughed loudly. As he laughed, he squatted on the ground again and sobbed bitterly. His sobs were low and deep, and his body was broken. After a long time, the door of the secret chamber opened again. The Dharma Supreme's clothes and shoes were neat and tidy, and he walked out expressionlessly. His eyes had regained their usual depth and calmness. Gather. Pass down my order. Law enforcement absolute kill order. The big clans have betrayed the law enforcement, colluded with the extraterrestrial demon, and become enemies with the whole world, intending to overthrow the heavens. Immediately summon all the law enforcement officers in the world to destroy the big clans at all costs and by all means. May I ask, Lord Dharma Supreme, what do you mean by destroying the big clans? Do you not understand the meaning of all round? Everything. Everything must be destroyed. The Dharma Supreme ordered coldly, from the foundation, to the manpower, shops, industries, grain routes. Everything as long as it belongs to the big clans, destroy it all. Kill them all, leave nothing behind. Men, women, old and young, eliminate them all. The Dharma Supreme gritted his teeth and issued such an order. If there are any obstructions, if there are any accomplices, they will be punished with the same crime. All the affiliated clans will be wiped out. Go! Then, Dharma Supreme, the original plan to deal with the Tribulation Sword Master and the Tribulations, ignore that for now. Let's first completely destroy the big clans that are a scourge to the world. As for the Tribulation Sword Master, I will deal with him personally. The Tribulation Sword Master and all the Tribulations are extremely powerful, and the tactic of using numbers is useless against them. Only by using strength against strength can we defeat them. I have already made plans for this, so don't be nosy, lest you disturb my overall plan. Yes, I understand. Orders of law enforcement were sent out one after another from here. First to the headquarters of the law enforcement officers, then from there to every corner of the continent. All the law enforcement officers suddenly launched a frenzied attack from this day onwards. Yes, the big clans, who were once allies, attacked with all their might, without any reservations. This day, in the records of the heavenly continent in the future, was called the beginning of the Blood River. The Dharma Supreme stood in the forest, his eyes cold and emotionless. So what if I betray the world? Chapter 1657. When Chu Yang and the others returned to their lodgings, Mo Tianji, the only one left behind, was already anxiously waiting for them. Although Mo Tianji had the help of the heavy pills when he used the forbidden secret technique, mind transmission, previously and didn't leave behind any hidden injuries and could even recover within a few days, he would still be greatly weakened in the next few days and his ability to fight was greatly weakened. However, Mo Tianji was ultimately a think tank. If even he had to fight with his life on the line, the situation would probably really become extremely dangerous. This was also the main reason why Mo Tianji had stayed behind. However, he didn't know whether it was a coincidence or not. But Chu Yang had rushed to Tan Tan's rescue this time. And he had ended up in an extremely dangerous situation. This was something that Mo Tianji hadn't expected. Throughout the journey, without the interference of external enemies, the heavy pills continued to show their powerful effects. Chu Yang's injuries were naturally in a state of continuous improvement. Even Gu Igu and the others, although they couldn't be said to be in a good condition, had also more or less regained some mobility. Of course, these heavily injured people still had to be carried by Gu Duxing and the others. It seemed like if Gu Duxing and the others hadn't rushed over, Wu Jueqing and Chu Lu really wouldn't have been able to carry such a large group of people back. No matter how strong an expert was, he only had 2 hands. There were 7 to 8 living people here, and all of them were men. How were they supposed to handle this? Tan Tan, who was still in a deep coma, was carried on Gu Duxing's back as if he was carrying a sack. If Tan Tan was awake, he might just strangle Gu Duxing to death. This guy actually put his head down on his shoulders and his legs in front of him, only hugging his calves as they sped along. As they moved, Tan Tan's body swayed here and there. That head of his kept bumping into Gu Duxing's buttocks, repeatedly and intimately. Gu Igu and the others were naturally furious at how their Saint King was being abused by someone like this. They criticized him non-stop the entire way. Complaining. When they recovered some energy, they even started to hurl abuse at him. GMO, Luo Kadi and the others were all displeased. When they saw that these few old men were already full of anger and could scold people, they very straightforwardly put them on their shoulders as well. Their posture of carrying the sack was exactly the same as Gu Duxing's. Wasn't it easy to copy? Weren't you guys unhappy? Why don't we just give you the same treatment as your Saint King? One sheep is the same as herding a flock of sheep. In the blink of an eye, the curses along the way shook the heavens. He scolded them all the way. Tan Tan was lucky to be carried like this. After all, he was in a deep coma at the moment. So, he couldn't feel anything. However, Gu Igu and the others were extremely miserable. Completely conscious, they could clearly sense that their faces, noses, and lips were unceasingly moving. Again and again, she bumped into the buttocks of the guy who was carrying her. Puff, puff, puff. What was even more unbearable was that Gu Igu simply couldn't stand the fact that GMO was carrying him on his back. In order to achieve the same effect, GMO had actually only grabbed his ankle. His nose kept touching this guy's butt. Sometimes, he would even feel that he had fallen into a ditch. Gu Igu's injuries had just recovered a little when he almost fainted again from the disgust. This guy was too vile. Could it be any worse? Energy and wood energy. Reality proved that they could. One of the 3 Stars Divine Clan's elders got down from Luo Kudi's back when they finally arrived at the inn's entrance. He didn't care about the severity of his injuries. He didn't care about anything else. He was in so much pain that he wished he was dead. He pounced on Luo Kudi and fought with his life. Luo Kudi, who was in peak condition, did not dare to face him. He covered his head and fled like a rat, disappearing in the blink of an eye. This result left everyone flabbergasted. What exactly was going on? That elder's curses reverberated throughout the entire inn. Even Mo Tianji, who was keeping watch inside, was baffled. However, when they asked him what exactly was going on, he refused to say anything. In any case, there was only one sentence that came out of his mouth over and over again. I cannot coexist with this guy who is carrying me on his back today. We can't coexist under the same sky. It's either me or him. In the end, Luo Kudi finally returned sneakily. Everyone interrogated him under torture. It was only then that they realized why the two of them had such a grudge against each other. As it turned out, when Luo Kudi was carrying this elder in that position, it just so happened that the elder's mouth had intimately collided with Luo Kudi's butt. Second Master Luo had actually coincidentally farted, even though Luo Kudi had repeatedly stated that it was definitely not intentional. No one believed him. When this matter was brought up, everyone was eating around a large table. Chu Yang and the others immediately spat out all the rice and soup in their mouths. They coughed repeatedly and laughed so hard that they almost choked. This was a new record created by Luo Kudi. It could cause many of the world's top experts and second-grade supreme martial artists to be injured at almost the same time. Even though it was just choking, choking was still an injury, no? It was even a type of internal injury. As for the ones who were the most seriously injured, they were not the ones. There were also Mo Qinggu, Chu Lu, and Mo Leilu. These 3 ladies were all frowning as they stared at Luo Kudi hatefully. They no longer had any appetite and could vaguely feel waves of nausea. Luo Kudi, there's really a reason why this elder and you cannot coexist under the same sky. Ha! After GMO said this, he burst into laughter. However, what he said right after made Gu Igu flip the table on the spot. Why didn't I think of farting back then? What a miscalculation. Everyone was fooling around downstairs, so there was no need to elaborate further. Chu Yang and Mo Tianji were discussing matters in the room upstairs. Mo Tianji listened to Chu Yang's sigh as he narrated the entire process of this matter in detail. Then, Mo Tianji became pensive. Then, Mo Tianji suddenly sighed and said, "The Dharma Supreme can be said to be the most pitiful person in the heavenly layer. Hateful people indeed have something to be pitied." Chu Yang agreed. Actually, I was thinking about a question just now. If I were to encounter the same situation as the Dharma Supreme, what would I do? What would I do? If the role was switched to you, what would you do? If it were Du Xing and the others, what would the outcome be? Mo Tianji smiled lightly. Chu Yang, what do you think? Chu Yang smiled bitterly. More or less would make the same choice as him. Mo Tianji clearly didn't treat this topic as a joke. Instead, he seriously pondered over it and said, others may not understand or approve of it. However, as the kidnappers, we should understand and approve of it. If our brothers were to be injured, how would we react? If you were to choose between the world and your brothers, and you could only choose one, what would you choose? Mo Tianji chuckled. Moreover, the Dharma Supreme was facing a situation where 8 of his brothers died together. It's like me, Du Xing, and the others were all killed. What would I do? If the Dharma Supreme was replaced by Du Xing, what would the outcome be? Chu Yang's calm expression suddenly turned serious. If you were the Dharma Supreme, and all of us were killed, then you would definitely seek revenge at all costs. Even if you were to stand against all the people in the world, you would not turn back. If you eventually knew that it was a misunderstanding, then you would think of ways to make up for it. Even if it was painful, you would hold on. You would carry it and persevere all the way. You are such a person. Mo Tianji looked at Chu Yang. Chu Yang's heart was touched, and he nodded silently. Throughout his 2 lives, Mo Tianji was the one who understood Chu Yang the most. Mo Tianji understood Chu Yang better than Mo Qingwu, Meng Chao Ran, Tan Tan, and even Chu Yang himself. If Du Xing had reached the final step of the Dharma Supreme, he would have simply retired and disappeared without a trace. He would have been alone for a lifetime. If it were Xie Danqiong and Ao Shiyun, they would have tried their best to survive. Their choice should be similar to yours, to try their best to make up for it. However, they would still try to find us. If it were Dong Wushang and Rui Badong, they would probably not do anything. They would just commit suicide. Not facing all this is the simplest and least painful way. As for GMO and Luo Kadi, they would not choose to commit suicide. However, if they end up like the Dharma Supreme, going crazy would be their only outcome. Lastly, it's me. Mo Tianji was deep in thought. My choice from the start would probably be the same as the Dharma Supremes. Step by step, the changes would be similar. Even the final outcome. I'm afraid I would also choose the Dharma Supreme's current method. We are all people who use our brains to make a living. Our thinking is really similar. Mo Tianji shook his head and smiled bitterly. In the end, the Dharma Supreme and I are ultimately the same type of people. It's just that I am luckier than him, much luckier. At least, I don't have to make that kind of damn choice. Chu Yang heaved a long sigh of relief. He did not open his mouth to speak, but deep down he agreed with Mo Tianji. Thinking back to his previous life, Mo Tianji had taken revenge on him for Mo Qingwu. That was really a means of death. If one were to look at the root of it, how was it different from what the Dharma Supreme was doing now? Therefore, the Dharma Supreme is still a man in his bones. It's just that his lust for power has blinded his eyes and corrupted a hero, Mo Tianji concluded. Chu Yang nodded. Yes, it's indeed a pity, but he still has to die in the end. Yes, we must kill him. Mo Tianji was also a little disappointed. Only by dying in our hands can the Dharma Supreme be truly free. This is no longer a trick of the heavens, but a change in the situation. Only by dying can he resolve all the disputes and changes before him. Only by dying in our hands can he truly be free. The two of them looked at each other and saw the complex emotions in each other's eyes. Making friends throughout one's life. If one can find a friend like the Dharma Supreme, it's actually also a kind of luck. Great luck. Chu Yang stood up and walked slowly to the window, saying slowly, "Yes, what's wrong with sacrificing the whole world to avenge your brother? What's wrong with slaughtering the common people?" Mo Tianji's voice was full of praise. Vicious and merciless, unscrupulous in order to achieve his goal. Evil as the mountains, evil as the seas. What a man of character. We often say such things and think such things. That's why it's loyalty. Mo Tianji's tone was a little sad. But the Dharma Supreme really did it. So it became a sin. Times change, that's all there is to it. Chu Yang nodded slowly. When Chu Yang and the others returned to their lodgings, Mo Tianji, who was the only one left behind, was already anxiously waiting for them. Although Mo Tianji had used the forbidden secret technique, heart transmission, previously with the help of Zhongdan, it didn't leave any hidden injuries and could even recover in a few days. But in the next few days, his vitality was still greatly damaged and his ability to fight was greatly weakened. However, Mo Tianji was ultimately the brains of the group. If even he had to fight with his life, the situation would probably really be extremely dangerous. This was also the main reason why Mo Tianji had stayed behind. However, he didn't know whether it was a coincidence or not. But Chu Yang had rushed to Tan Tan's rescue this time. And he had ended up in an extremely dangerous situation. This was something that Mo Tianji hadn't expected. Along the way, without the interference of external enemies, the Zhongdan continued to show its powerful effects. Chu Yang's injuries were naturally in a state of continuous improvement. Even Gu Igu and the others, although they couldn't be said to be in a good condition, had also more or less regained some mobility. Of course, these seriously injured people still had to be carried by Gu Duxing and the others. It seemed like if Gu Duxing and the others hadn't rushed over, Wu Jueqing and Chu Lu really wouldn't have been able to carry such a large group of people back. No matter how strong an expert was, they only had 2 hands. There were 7 to 8 living people, and all of them were men. How could they possibly handle this? Tan Tan, who was still in a state of deep unconsciousness, was carried on Gu Duxing's back like a sack. If Tan Tan was awake, he might just strangle Gu Duxing to death. This guy actually put his head down on his shoulders and his 2 legs in front of him, only hugging his calves and sprinting all the way. As they moved, Tan Tan's body swayed here and there. That head kept bumping against Gu Duxing's buttocks, bumping again and again, repeatedly and intimately. Gu Igu and the others were naturally furious at how their Saint King was being abused by someone like this. They criticized and complained non-stop all the way. When they had recovered some energy, they even started to hurl abuse at him. GMO, Luo Kadi and the others were all displeased. When they saw that these few old men were already so angry that they could scold people, they very straightforwardly carried Tan Tan on their shoulders as well. The way they carried the sack was exactly the same as Gu Duxing's. Wasn't it easy to copy? Weren't you guys unhappy? Why don't we just give you the same treatment as your Saint King? 1 sheep is the same as herding a flock of sheep. In an instant, the curses and insults were earth-shattering. They were really scolded along the way. Tan Tan was considered lucky to be carried like this. Because he was currently in a state of deep unconsciousness, he couldn't feel anything at all. However, Gu Igu and the others were extremely miserable. Completely conscious, they could clearly sense that their faces, noses, and lips were continuously bumping into the buttocks of the fellow who was carrying them, again and again, again and again. What was even more unbearable was that Gu Igu really couldn't stand the fact that GMO was carrying him. In order to achieve the same effect, GMO actually only grabbed his ankles while his nose continuously bumped into this fellow's buttocks. Sometimes, he could even coincidentally feel himself sinking into a ditch. Gu Igu's injuries had just recovered a little. He almost fainted from disgust again. This fellow was simply too vile. Could he be any more vile? Energy, wood, energy. The facts prove that energy. When they finally stopped at the entrance of the inn, one of the 3 Stars Divine Clan elders got down from Luo Kadi's back. Ignoring the severity of his injuries and the excruciating pain, he pounced on Luo Kadi and fought it out with him. Luo Kadi, who was in full condition, didn't dare to fight back at all. He covered his head and fled like a rat. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared without a trace. This outcome left everyone dumbfounded. What exactly was going on? That elder's curses reverberated throughout the entire inn. Even Mo Tianji, who was keeping watch inside, was baffled. However, when he was asked what exactly was going on, he refused to say anything. In any case, there was only one sentence that came out of his mouth. I am irreconcilable with this little guy who is carrying me today. We cannot live under the same sky. It's either me or him. Later on, Luo Kadi finally came back sneakily. It was only under torture that everyone found out why the 2 of them had such a grudge. As it turned out, when Luo Kadi was carrying this elder in that position, it just so happened that the elder's mouth was intimately colliding with Luo Kadi's buttocks. Second Master Luo actually coincidentally farted, even though Luo Kadi repeatedly stated that it was definitely not intentional. Not a single person believed him. When this matter was brought up, everyone was sitting around a large table and eating. Chu Yang and the others instantly spat out all the rice and soup in their mouths. They coughed repeatedly and laughed so hard that they almost choked. This was a new record created by Luo Kadi. It could cause many of the world's top experts and low-grade supreme martial artists to be injured at almost the same time. Even though it was just choking was still an injury, wasn't it? It was a type of internal injury. As for the ones who were the most seriously injured, it wasn't these people. There were still Mo Qingwu, Chu, and Emole, are present. These three ladies were all frowning as they stared hatefully at Luo Kadi. They no longer had any appetite and could vaguely feel waves of nausea. Luo Kadi, there's really a reason why this elder is irreconcilable with you. Ha! After GMO said this, he burst into laughter. However, what he said right after made Gu Igu flip the table on the spot. Why didn't I think of farting back then? What a miscalculation. Everyone was fooling around downstairs, so there was no need for him to elaborate any further. Chu Yang and Mo Tianji were discussing matters in the room upstairs. Listening to Chu Yang's sighs as he recounted the entire process of this incident in detail, Mo Tianji fell into deep thought. Then, Mo Tianji suddenly sighed and said, "The Dharma Supreme can be said to be the most pitiful person in the heavenly layer. Hateful people indeed have aspects that are worth pitying." Chu Yang expressed his agreement. Actually, when I was deep in thought just now, I was actually thinking about a question. If I were to encounter the same situation as the Dharma Supreme, what would I do? What would I choose? If the role was switched to you, what would you do? If it were Du Xing and the others, what would the outcome be? Mo Tianji smiled lightly. Chu Yang, what do you think? Chu Yang smiled bitterly. You would more or less make the same choice as him. Mo Tianji obviously didn't treat this topic as a joke. Instead, he began to think very seriously. He said, others may not understand or approve of it. However, as the robbers, we should be able to understand and approve of it. If our brothers were to be harmed by others, how would we react? If you were to choose between the world and your brothers, and you could only choose one, what would you choose? Mo Tianji chuckled. Moreover, the situation that the Dharma Supreme was faced with back then was that 8 of his brothers had died together. It's equivalent to me being in the same situation as Du Xing and the others. All 8 of them were killed by others. What would I do? If the Dharma Supreme were to be replaced by Du Xing, what would the outcome be? Chu Yang's peaceful expression suddenly turned serious. If you were the Dharma Supreme, and all of us brothers were killed by others, then you would definitely seek revenge at all costs. Even if you were to stand on the opposite side of the world, you wouldn't turn back for this price. If you eventually found out that it was a misunderstanding, then you would think of ways to make up for it. Even if it was painful, you would hold on. You would carry on and persevere all the way. You are such a person. Mo Tianji looked at Chu Yang. Chu Yang's heart was touched. He nodded silently. Throughout his 2 lifetimes, Mo Tianji was the one who understood Chu Yang the most. Mo Tianji understood Chu Yang better than Mo Qinggu, Meng Chaoran, Tan Tan, and even Chu Yang himself. If Du Xing had reached the final step of the Dharma Supreme, he would have simply retired and disappeared without a trace. He would have been alone for a lifetime. If it were Xie Danqiong and Ao Shiyun, they would have tried their best to survive. Their choice should be similar to yours, to try their best to make up for it. However, they would still try to find us. If it were Dong Wushang and Rui Badong, they probably wouldn't have done anything. They would have simply committed suicide. Not facing all this is the simplest and least painful way. As for GMO and Luo Kadi, they wouldn't have chosen suicide. However, if they ended up like the Dharma Supreme, going crazy would be their only outcome. Lastly, it's me. Mo Tianji was deep in thought. My initial choice would probably be the same as the Dharma Supremes. Step by step, the changes would be similar. Even the final outcome. I'm afraid I would also choose what the Dharma Supreme is doing now. We are all people who use our brains to make a living. Our thinking is really similar. Mo Tianji shook his head and smiled bitterly. In the end, the Dharma Supreme and I are ultimately the same type of people. It's just that I am luckier than him, much luckier. At least, I don't have to make that kind of damn choice. Chu Yang heaved a long sigh of relief. He didn't speak, but he agreed with Mo Tianji endlessly. Thinking back to his previous life, Mo Tianji had taken revenge on him for Mo Qinggu. That was really a means of death. If one were to look at the root of it, how was it different from what the Dharma Supreme was doing now? Therefore, the Dharma Supreme is still a man in his bones. It's just that his lust for power has blinded his eyes and corrupted a hero. Mo Tianji concluded. Chu Yang nodded. Yes, it's indeed a pity, but he still has to die in the end. Yes, we must kill him. Mo Tianji was also a little disappointed. Only by dying in our hands can the Dharma Supreme be truly free. This is no longer a trick of the heavens, but a change in the situation. Only by dying can he resolve all the disputes and changes before him. Only by dying in our hands can he truly be free. The two of them looked at each other and saw the complex emotions in each other's eyes. Making friends throughout one's life. If one can find a friend like the Dharma Supreme, it's actually also a kind of luck. Chu Yang stood up and slowly walked to the window. He then said slowly, "Yes, what's wrong with sacrificing the world to avenge one's brother? What's wrong with slaughtering the common people?" Mo Tianji's voice was full of praise. Vicious and merciless, unscrupulous in order to achieve one's goal. Evil as the mountain, evil as the sea. What a man of character. We often say such things and think such things. That's why it's a code of brotherhood. Mo Tianji's tone was a little sentimental. But the Dharma Supreme really did it, and it became a sin. Changes in the situation are nothing more than this. Chu Yang nodded slowly. Chapter 1658. Then, what do you think the Dharma Supreme will do next? Chu Yang asked. Mo Tianji frowned. He remained silent for a long time. Then he muttered, "I just said that he and I are very similar. I tried to make some guesses in his place. But I can't be sure. I don't dare to be sure, because Mo Tianji wanted to say something, but he didn't say it in the end. He just sighed and said, I hope it's not like what I guessed. Otherwise, I'm not the Dharma Supreme himself and can't be counted. Let's wait and see. If I'm not wrong, we'll have news in a day or two." That night, the vicinity of the capital was suddenly plunged into chaos. Chu Yang got up in the middle of the night and flew to the roof. After a while, his brothers all came up. Everyone could clearly sense that apart from the increasing noise, there was also an extremely strong smell of blood coming from all directions, and it was indeed getting worse. What exactly happened? Why is there such a change? Wu Jueqing looked into the distance. Mo Tianji was obviously touched. He looked a little regretful as he stared into the distance, speechless for a while. According to my experience, this kind of situation should be a large-scale massacre. Only then can there be such an aura. Moreover, this massacre is still ongoing. Chu Yang also sighed. The location of the massacre is very far from here, at least 1,000 miles away. If it was closer, it wouldn't be so quiet. The next day, the news came. Everyone was collectively shocked. The entire Yi clan had almost collectively gone crazy. Around them, all the affiliated clans of the Yi clan were completely massacred overnight. More than 100,000 people died overnight. In the secret chamber, everyone's faces were heavy. Yang's voice transmission Jade kept reporting further news from all sides. Or it could be said that there was further bad news. The law enforcement officers suddenly launched a tyrannical attack when the clans were caught off guard. In the entire upper three heavens, an inhumane massacre was carried out. And the targets of the massacre were the big clans. Blood flowed for 1,000 miles overnight. The affiliated clans of the Shao clan were almost completely massacred. Most of the people outside were captured and killed. And this was still going on. The headquarters of the Shao clan in the southeast was also attacked by the law enforcement officers and suffered heavy losses. At present, they were still in a stalemate. The prospects were not optimistic at all. Without assistance, destruction was imminent. The Qin clan, all of its subsidiary clans were wiped out. Their headquarters and businesses were burned down by the enforcers, directly burning down 3,000 miles of forest. The casualties of the Qin clan were even more uncountable. At present, the situation had stabilized for the time being, and they had begun to confront the law enforcement officers. However, the law enforcement officers who were continuously supporting them from all directions had also begun to gather there. The situation wasn't optimistic. The Ling family, The enforcers used a huge amount of explosives to detonate under the ice peak. Half of the Ling family's ice peak and snow mountain collapsed overnight. There were countless casualties, checked. Their forces were greatly reduced, and they were in a stalemate. Zhuge family, sealed. They were attacked and suffered a large number of casualties. Being attacked. Confrontation. The news that came from all directions was that they had been attacked, that there had been a large number of casualties, and that sort of negative news. The law enforcement officers had formed a huge foundation over the past 10,000 years. Last night, it was actually detonated in such a direct and unscrupulous manner. Furthermore, it was an all-around explosion that was close to indiscriminate. In these 10,000 years, how many people were there in total? This was an uncountable number. If it's only about distributing the world, then it's at the headquarters of the Great Hall. There were at least 300 branch halls, and under each branch hall, there were more than 10 branch halls. There were at least 40 to 50 people in each branch. There were about 1,000 people in each branch. In this way, there would be at least 300,000 law enforcement officers in each branch. And this was the most conservative figure that was obtained purely through calculation. There were as many as such branches under the law enforcement officers. Apart from that, there were also the various branches in the law enforcement officers' headquarters. The most conservative estimate was that there were at least 4 million people in the law enforcement officers' forces. This didn't include the hidden forces on the law enforcement officers' side, such as the Bloodpayers Hall. The forces under the Bloodpayers Hall were all wanderers in the pugilistic world. There were hundreds of thousands of them, and all of them were experts. When they gathered together to receive an emergency mission, they were even more desperados among desperados. In just one night, the entire continent had undergone an earth-shattering change. A rough estimate was that in just one night, the number of casualties on both sides would be at least more than 1 million. In the secret chamber, the faces of Yi Qinshan and the others were as pale as ashes. The Dharma Supreme is definitely crazy this time. Ling Muyang took a deep breath. His eyes flashed and his expression was cold. Is there a mistake somewhere? How did things suddenly develop to this stage? The Dharma Supreme has always been scheming and astute. By doing this, the losses outweigh the gains. Did something go wrong somewhere? Chen Yingfeng, the clan master of the Chen clan, knew that the truth was already clear, but he still held onto the slightest bit of hope and asked. After all, the reality was too unexpected and too cruel. This had completely exceeded the bottom line of everyone's psychological tolerance. It can't be wrong. This is the truth. And the latest news just came. The Dharma Supreme has already used the law enforcement absolute kill order. Xiao Qinyu's face was pale, and the corners of his mouth were trembling. There's a sentence in the order that goes like this: no matter the cost, no matter the means, completely wipe out the big clans. Hiss, everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. No matter the cost? No matter the means? What did these two sentences mean? Everyone understood too well. It meant that no matter the means, anyone could be sacrificed, any sacrifice could be made, and any price could be paid. Even if the law enforcement officers had to be wiped out after the big clans were wiped out, it didn't matter. Anyway, as long as the big clans were completely wiped out, nothing else mattered. Dharma Supreme. You damned bastard. Xiao Qinyu finally couldn't help but roar. What kind of deep grudge does our big clans have with you? How dare you do such a vicious thing? Zhuge Zangqiong's face was gloomy. He slowly turned his head and looked at someone who hadn't spoken at all. He said indifferently, our big clans have all been attacked to varying degrees, but only one clan has not been attacked. At this juncture, I have to mention it. Everyone followed his gaze. In an instant, everyone's eyes were focused on one person's face. Diwu Qingru. In these few days, Diwu Qingru had put in all his effort to prepare for the Tianding Grand Meeting, especially to adjust the distribution of power among the big clans. His meticulous planning and exceptionally strong planning ability had conquered Zhuge Zangqiong on the first day. In these few days, everyone had also gotten along like fish in water. Everyone had given Diwu Qingru full trust and affirmation in his ability and capability. This allowed him to have the leeway and space to do his best. But now, in the face of this sudden change, only the Diwu clan could stay out of it. If this situation was only temporary, it would still be fine. But if it continued like this, it would eventually make everyone uncomfortable and suspicious. Zhuge Zhangqiong didn't deliberately target Diwu Qingru by bringing this issue to the surface. There was no other way. He was the recognized think tank of the big clans and also where the brains were. He could only be the ugly one. Diwu Qingru's expression didn't change. He said indifferently, "Regarding this matter, I also don't understand the reason. However, Qingru's various plans and schemes during this period have all been seen by all of you. Whether Qingru has selfish motives or not, there will naturally be a public opinion." Yi Qinshan and the others were a little embarrassed. Diwu Qingru's words were very powerful. "All of you have been watching me, scheming, approving and trusting me. But now, once there is even the slightest movement without even a conclusion about the details, you will fall out with me?" This logic didn't seem to make sense anywhere, did it? If it was another time, what was the point of logic? If you were suspected, it would already be a capital offense. Even if you weren't beaten to death, you would have to be restrained first before anything else. This was the way the big clans did things in the first place. Any sprouts of negative possibilities would have to be eliminated. But now, time was not on their side. The big clans had suddenly undergone a great change and each clan's strength had been reduced by half in just a few days. If they rebelled now and targeted Diwu Qingru, the new clan leader of a new clan, it would be tantamount to breaking their own arms. The losses outweighed the gains. Perhaps this is the Dharma Supreme's attempt to sow discord? Shi Paoxiao asked thoughtfully. The Shi clan was destroyed. The only surviving Shi clan ancestor, Shi Paoxiao, no longer had the clan's power, but also no longer had the clan's burden. At this juncture, he was the only suitable person to smooth things over. Perhaps. Yi Qinshan and the others nodded slightly. But their suspicions towards Diwu Qingru didn't dissipate at all. They really didn't dare to. Through this period of time spent with Diwu Qingru, everyone had a deep understanding of how terrifying Diwu Qingru was. If they really had an additional opponent like him, it wouldn't be just an additional blow, but a terrifying crisis that was enough to cause the complete destruction of all the big clans. However, at this moment, the communication jade lit up again. The new news stunned everyone for a moment. The newly established Diwu clan was attacked by the law enforcement officers. As the clan's experts were relatively weak, they couldn't form an effective counterbalance. The clan suffered heavy casualties. Less than 3 or 4 out of 10 experts survived. At this point, Diwu Qingru's expression finally changed greatly. Yi Qinshan and the others also changed their expressions. For a moment, the secret chamber fell into a deathly silence. Diwu Qingru flew out of the secret chamber where the clan leader was meeting. After he left, he suddenly slowed down his pace. He slowly rushed toward the encampment of the Diwu clan. His heart was in turmoil and he was full of doubts. What exactly was going on? Thinking of how the Dharma Supreme and the law enforcement officers helped the Diwu clan during the decisive battle in the northwest, and how they were now suppressing the Diwu clan, Diwu Qingru was even a little confused. Chapter 1659. Thinking about today's encounter, Diwu Qingru sighed. He already knew that these people were short-sighted and not good partners. But he never thought that they would be short-sighted to this extent. Just because his family suffered a calamity too late, he actually planned to fall out with him? They were unlucky, but it was not enough for other clans to not be unlucky, and this was because their strength was greatly reduced. If it were the same as before, they would have arrested him for the crime of colluding with the enemy. Diwu Qingru couldn't help but feel a chill in his heart when he thought of the news of his clan being attacked and the heavy losses they had suffered. Then, he thought of how those people had breathed a sigh of relief. Then, he thought of how they had consoled him. Walking past a remote place, Diwu Qingru instinctively felt a sense of danger. A familiar pressure surged in his heart. He stopped and turned around, saying softly, It's you. At this moment, a figure flashed in front of him. A black figure appeared in front of Diwu Qingro. Brother Diwu, how have you been? Diwu Qingro looked up and could not help but smile. Brother Chu. I knew you were coming. The person who came was naturally Chu Yang, king of Hell Chu. How about a chat with me? I also have the same intention. Very good. The two of them looked kind as they walked side by side. All along, the two of them had been mortal enemies for most of the time. However, the two of them were walking side by side today. It was an indescribable harmony. They both had a lot on their minds. They both sympathized with each other. The killing in the world was still ongoing. Chu Yang and Diwu Qingro walked quickly, avoiding others as much as possible. They rushed north like the wind. Diwu Qingro's martial strength was not among the best in the world, but he could still run wildly. Moreover, Chu Yang put one hand on his shoulder. Then he rushed out like a bolt of lightning, bringing him along. The oncoming people could only feel a gust of wind and couldn't see any shadows. The two figures had already disappeared into the distance. The mountains and the earth were left far behind by the two people who were galloping. The sound of water ahead was like thunder. In front of them was the largest river in the Chongtian continent, Ancestral Spirit River. Ancestral Spirit River, Ancestral Spirit River, you will be king for thousands of years. It nurtures living creatures from ancient times to the present. It connects the human world and the heavens. Legend has it that the Ancestral Spirit River has no source. No one had ever been able to find the source of the Ancestral Spirit River. It was this mighty river that had nourished the heavy heavens since ancient times. The Ancestral Spirit River had never been flooded before. The narrowest part of the river was over 1,000 feet wide. The torrent surged forward with an earth-shattering momentum. We've reached the Ancestral Spirit River. Chu Yang sighed. He and Diwu Qingro streaked across the sky like meteors and landed on a big protruding rock on the riverbank. Below, the turbid waves surged to the heavens. The river flowed from the west and rolled towards the east. If it was an ordinary person, they would feel dizzy just by looking at it. If he was a little timid, he might be scared out of his wits. The Ancestral Spirit River is now muddy. Diwu Qingru gazed deeply at the river below and couldn't help but sigh. You're wrong. Chu Yang said softly, it's not that the Ancestral Spirit River has become muddy. Instead, someone had made the Ancestral Spirit River murky. One is a natural disaster, and the other is a monster. They can't be compared. At this moment, the river suddenly stirred up another wave. The water surged up to a height of over 100 feet, and the splashes were like a big screen. Under the sunlight, the splashes reflected a magnificent brilliance. It was extremely dazzling. This is... Diwu Qingro's eyes flashed with extreme shock. He clearly saw that the surging river was accompanied by an extremely dense blood color. He didn't notice it when they were on the river, but once it was stirred up, the faint blood-red color was undoubtedly revealed. If it wasn't blood-red, how could it be dazzling? Yes, it's blood. It's blood. Chu Yang's eyes were filled with pain. This Ancestral Spirit River, the source of life beneath the heavy heavens, has now become a river of blood, a river dyed red by blood. A river of blood. Chu Yang said with a heavy tone. Even with Diwu Qingro's calm temperament, he couldn't help but gasp. I can also confirm that there weren't any large-scale deaths within 1,000 miles. Chu Yang smiled bitterly. Diwu Qingro's eyes were filled with shock. The hidden meaning of Chu Yang's words was too shocking, enough to make most people's hair stand on end. If there weren't any large-scale deaths within 1,000 miles, it meant that the current blood color of the river actually came from 1,000 miles away. After 1,000 miles of water change, it could still show such a bloody color. Then, how many people had died upstream? How could it have reached such a state? The two of them stared intently at the rolling river water. They saw that not long after, there were many pieces of things flowing down from above. Some of them reached the riverside and were caught by the grass and puddles by the riverside. Some of them floated and fell into the whirlpool and were sucked into the bottom of the river. But there were still many that floated down. They were some incomplete corpses, or rather, the fragments of corpses. Some had broken limbs, some didn't have heads, some had large holes in their abdomens that had already begun to rot, and some only had broken limbs, and broken heads that had long been swollen from being soaked in water. Looking as far as they could, the surface of the river was densely packed and floated down like bubbles. Chu Yang's and Diwu Qingrou's eyes were a little dazed. How shocking was this scene that could make two great heroes of the world lose their minds? The answer was right in front of them. Brother Diwu, before looking for you, I actually came here once. At that time, the river was already like this. Then, I turned back to look for you. Now that I'm here again, it's still like this. And there are even more of them. Diwu Qingrou's face became even paler. Chu Yang sighed deeply. After discovering this massacre, he rushed out of the inn immediately to look for the Dharma Supreme and stop his actions. Because such a massacre was really too cruel. Too cruel. But he only found traces of the Dharma Supreme and other law enforcement officers stationed in a forest, as well as some faint aura of the existence of some extraterrestrial demons. A bigger gain was a strangely shaped head hanging on a tree. Chu Yang recognized at a glance that it was the head of the extraterrestrial demon. There was no doubt about it. The extraterrestrial demon that was previously seriously injured had already died in the hands of the Dharma Supreme. Even its head was hanging on a tree. The Dharma Supreme must have killed the extraterrestrial demon first and then issued this cruel order to massacre the world. Then he led his men and left this place, disappearing without a trace. After that, Chu Yang and the rest searched along the way, releasing their divine senses to the limit to search everywhere, but ultimately to no avail. The Dharma Supreme and the high-level law enforcement officers under his command. It was as if they had completely disappeared from this world without a trace. But the law enforcement officers everywhere were in a state of frenzied slaughter because of the Dharma Supreme's absolute kill order. The order was not rescinded and was still resolutely carried out. Faced with such a situation, everyone was at their wits' end. Even someone as resourceful as Imo Tianji could only be at his wits' end. Even if one had 1,000 brilliant plans, they would only follow one set of rules. The law enforcement officers would only carry out the orders of the Dharma Supreme, ignoring the orders, persuasions, pleas of others. And if anyone tried to dissuade them, they would all be punished with the same crime, as long as the Dharma Supreme did not appear. This situation would continue, unless they killed them. But how many could one kill? One could kill 10, 100, 1,000, even 10,000. But there would be even more law enforcement officers standing out. All the law enforcement officers in the world had gone crazy. It was really too much to kill. If one could kill on this side, they could kill on the other side. But the whole world was in turmoil. Could one kill all of them? The extraterrestrial demon tribulation, the end of the world is coming. Diwu Qingrou's lips were actually trembling. Diwu Qingrou had never lost confidence, but this time, the situation today made him lose confidence for the first time in his life. In this short period of time, the number of mutilated corpses and broken limbs floating down from the upper reaches had already reached tens of thousands. This did not include those that had sunk along the way, nor did it include those that had stopped. Just counting those that had completely relied on luck and drifted down with the waves, there were already so many. Then, how many people had died? How many people had died up till now? That was a huge number that one did not even dare to think about. It might even be a stroke of fate. After this, how many more people would die? How many people would be sacrificed in the end because of this great calamity? It was definitely a shocking number that would make one's hair stand on end just thinking about it. I've studied some of these corpses before. On all of them, there were traces of martial arts training. Moreover, although many of the corpses had died long ago, there was still some saint-level essence left in them that had not completely disappeared. Chu Yang said, "So, we can conclude that these dead people were all martial artists. Moreover, there were quite a number of saint-level experts among them. Some of them had tattered clothes hanging on them. We can still tell where these people belonged when they were alive. Most of them were from big clans. As for the rest, they were all law enforcement officers." Chu Yang said, Now, the law enforcement officers of the whole world have already started a war in the martial arts world. It seems that as long as there are corpses, they will be thrown into the river. This river has now been renamed by people. It is now called Blood River. According to Tianji's estimation, up till now, just the number of corpses of martial artists who have been thrown into this river alone has exceeded at least 100,000. More than 100,000 martial artists have all been buried in this river, and only up till now. Diwu Qingru took in a long breath. For a moment, he only felt his heart full of shock. It seemed that he had never felt such a series of shocks in his life as today. Just in this river alone, there were already more than 100,000 martial artists. Then, how many were there that were not near the river? At present, we have encountered a problem. The Dharma Supreme has started the battle of extermination. Then, after careful consideration, I realized that there was no way to solve this problem at all. This is really digging a hole and burying myself in it. Endless headache. Chapter 1660. Diwu Qingru had already heard about the crazy behavior of the law enforcement officers under the Dharma Supreme. But hearing about it was one thing, but seeing it with one's own eyes was a far cry from seeing it with one's own eyes. These people aren't ordinary people. Each one of them is at least an emperor-level expert. Emperor-level experts. I used to fight with Chu Yang in the lower three heavens. So, the appearance of an emperor-level expert can determine the rise and fall of the imperial court. But here, they were like rotten cabbages that were casually killed, casually thrown away, and casually thrown away. The lives of these so-called experts had already become as cheap as grass in this upper three heavens continent where war raged everywhere. Maybe it's just like what I said just now, the heavenly demon catastrophe, the doomsday battle is coming. Chu Yang sighed deeply. At this moment, Chu Yang couldn't help but feel a little regretful. That day, Wu Jueqing had asked him if he should tell the Dharma Supreme about what happened back then. Even though Chu Yang had made it clear that he was against it, he didn't strictly prohibit it. And at that time, he was only worried about Wu Jueqing's safety and whether he would be deceived. He didn't really consider the Dharma Supreme's attitude and the possible changes that might have happened. If he had known, Chu Yang would have rather kept this secret to himself forever. Now, after Wu Jueqing blurted it out, the Dharma Supreme was actually so agitated after knowing the truth. Because of the extreme agitation of this matter, the Dharma Supreme actually launched the doomsday battle without any warning. The doomsday catastrophe. Chu Yang let out a long sigh in his heart. This was Diwu Chochang venting, and also his last big move. Such hysteria, such madness, such. But it was undeniable that there was a very subtle meaning in it. He was actually helping himself, helping tribulation. Helping tribulation complete the replacement of the old era with the new as soon as possible. This was something Chu Yang couldn't deny. But such help made Chu Yang's heart tremble. Maybe he was using this method to announce the complete destruction of Diwu Chochang, and also using this method to remember his brothers? Or maybe he was compensating himself for what he owed tribulation in the past 10,000 years? After all, the tribulation sword master was now the enemy of the whole world. The difficult situation was caused by the Dharma Supreme's deliberate planning. Even the greatest helper of the master of tribulation's sword, the law enforcement officers, had been turned into the Dharma Supreme's greatest enemy. If he were to change it again and call it helping the tribulation sword master, the Dharma Supreme would never do such a thing. Therefore, he could only walk this path to the end. And now, the Dharma Supreme. Making use of the law enforcement officers to eliminate all the living forces of the big clans regardless of the cost and consequences was like using a spear to attack a shield. In the end, the most likely outcome was that both sides would suffer. Even if the law enforcement officers were lucky enough to win in the end, they would suffer heavy losses. In the end, the law enforcement officers on the Dharma Supreme's side would definitely engage in a head-on battle with Chu Yang and tribulation under the Dharma Supreme's stubbornness. In the end, all of them would be destroyed in the hands of Chu Yang, the master of tribulation sword, including the Dharma Supreme himself. This was the final madness of the Dharma Supreme, the battle of doomsday. I single-handedly established the order of this world. He had built up such a huge force with the intention of going against the Tribulation Sword Master. But I realized that I was wrong, so I decided to destroy everything that I had built. No matter how many people I have to kill. Regardless of whether these people were innocent or deserved it, that has nothing to do with me. I just want to do my own thing. I only want the final result to be what I want. This extremely arrogant think tank of his generation. All of his plans. Since ancient times, for hundreds of thousands of years, the law enforcement officers' forces had never been as strong as they were now. The law enforcement officers were originally hegemonic machines that stabilized the power of the heavens. Under the wise leadership of the Dharma Supreme, this generation's think tank, they had developed rapidly in the past 10,000 years. Not only had the number of law enforcement halls increased by dozens of times, but they had also developed a powerful assassin organization, the blood payers of the law enforcement officers. These people had been relying on money for a long time and had already formed a habit formed in order to survive. Once the law enforcement officers gave an order and offered a reward, they would subconsciously carry it out. Because if they did not carry it out, there would be no food to eat, no shelter, no cultivation resources, in short, there would be no need for survival. Do not underestimate this force. The concealment and power of this force was definitely not something that anyone could ignore. There were many people from big clans who were having a meal with a friend the day before. But the next day, after the blood payers of the law enforcement officers issued a reward, their heads were hung on the waistband of this friend and they went forward to receive the reward. Everything happened too suddenly and too unexpectedly. It's too sudden and too unexpected. Diwu Qingrou's expression was complicated and shocked. The actions of the Dharma Supreme are completely inhumane and heartless. He is completely deranged from head to toe. He wants to destroy the martial arts foundation of the heavens continent for hundreds of thousands of years. Chu Yang smiled bitterly. If not for the fact that this was the case, why would they spend so much effort to search for the whereabouts of the Dharma Supreme? That's right. The Dharma Supreme's actions this time are really deranged and have made us very passive. A white shadow flashed and Emotianji appeared behind the two of them. His handsome face was full of a bitter smile. This time, I came to look for Brother Diwu to discuss this. Although we had the intention to join forces previously, it was far from the time to do so. But this time, we have to join forces to resist the Dharma Supreme. Otherwise, the heavens continent will be completely destroyed by him. Emotianji shook his head and smiled bitterly. He is indeed the think tank of tribulation back then. This action is really vicious. No matter how we deal with it, I'm afraid it will be within the Dharma Supreme's plan. No matter how we react to him, it may be considered as cooperating. So, it's really difficult. Of course, Diwu Qingru could recognize Emotianji, the military advisor of this generation. However, the two of them didn't even have time to exchange greetings before they frowned at the same time. Chu Yang, Emotianji, and Diwu Qingru. If others saw this, they wouldn't believe it even if they went crazy. These three people actually gathered together to discuss matters one day and were even at their wits' end. This was really like seeing a ghost. These three people joined forces to study how to deal with one person, yet they were still at their wits' end. This was even rarer than seeing a ghost. But such a rare thing happened just like that, and it happened almost without any warning. Previously, Emotianji had put himself in the Dharma Supreme's shoes and thought about it. But this was the conclusion he came to. It was exactly the same as what the Dharma Supreme was doing now, destroy the world. Since I've already reached this stage, I have no other choice. Since I was wrong, then let me make my mistake even more thorough. Let me be the one to blame for all the sins. Let me be consigned to eternal damnation. When Emotianji first told Chu Yang about this conjecture, Chu Yang was drenched in cold sweat and prayed from the bottom of his heart that this wasn't the case. But just after midnight, this situation completely happened. The Dharma Supreme and Emotianji were the brains of this tribulation. Their high intelligence was unparalleled in the world. Faced with such a situation, The decision they made was actually the same. It was terrifying to the extreme. Mo Tianji briefed Di Wuqing about the series of unforeseen events that had happened in the recent days. Then he and the other two looked at the surging river water and the piles of floating corpses under their feet. They heaved a long sigh. The current situation was really so bad that it was unimaginable. According to my estimation, after this incident, the survival rate of high-level heavenly layer martial artists is definitely less than 1% of the original peak. Or even less. Chu Yang sighed. This is a catastrophe for heavenly layer martial artists. And it's a catastrophe that we have no choice but to participate in. Mo Tianji's expression was heavy as he smiled bitterly. If we don't try our best to stop it, after the Dharma Supreme has killed all the people he wants to kill, he will still come to us for a battle to the death. If we stop it, it may be what the Dharma Supreme wants. He doesn't want the force of the law enforcement officers to continue existing. Once we take action, we will be participating in the killing. And no matter how many we kill, the Dharma Supreme won't care. He will only follow his set goal and original plan, all the way until there is no one around him that he can use and his own people are all dead. Or all the people he wants to kill are all dead. This is a dead end. No matter which way we go, it's a dead end. No matter what we do, the final result is that the Dharma Supreme's actions this time will be a complete cleansing of the entire world. And we have no choice but to participate and stop it. Even though this is a futile effort, we still have to work hard in vain. These three men, who were already standing at the peak of the upper three heavens and even the entire heavenly layer, sat together and had a headache. It had to be said that under this sky, something that could cause such a headache to the three of them should not exist. Logically speaking, it should not appear. It did not seem to exist at all. But now, the Dharma Supreme didn't use any profound wisdom at all. He only used the most barbaric and primitive method of suppression. A normal person in power would definitely not use such a crazy tactic. It was beyond the level of harming the enemy by 1,000 and harming 800 of his own people. If it wasn't for the fact that the law enforcement officers were extremely powerful, the casualty rate would definitely be reduced. This was because the law enforcement officers were almost equivalent to making the entire upper three heavens and all the aristocratic families their enemy. This extremely simple yet extremely brutal tactic made the three of them completely helpless. Join the battle? The first question to consider was actually who to help. From a moral point of view, they should help the big clans. However, a considerable part of the reason why the Dharma Supreme started the battle to destroy the world was to facilitate Tribulation's reorganization of the forces and order. At this juncture, if Tribulation were to help the big clans instead, he wouldn't be able to accept it psychologically. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Immortal Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.